Jenkins he's a senior and plans to attend Rose after graduation. Avalar is a senior as well and plans to attend college. And Hott is a senior as well and plans to either enlist or go to college or both. So thank you for being here, and please stand for the invocation and the pledge.
Would you bow with me, please?
Please join us for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag. Wait. I'm sorry.
After he prays.
Okay, sorry.
All right. We're good. Father God, we thank you so much for this day, Lord. We give you the glory and the honor for this occasion. Father, we thank you so much for this great land that we live in and the freedoms we enjoy, the freedom to assemble. Father, the freedom to share our ideas and speak our mind. Father, we pray that you'll help us not take that for granted. We know most of the rest of the world does not have this privilege, and we thank you for this great land. Father, we know we have men and women who are serving this great country and protecting and guarding our freedoms, and we ask your blessing of protection and peace be upon them. Father, men and women who are keeping our streets safe tonight in this community, those men and women who are ensuring that we have safe water to drink, and Father, that things are disposed of properly. We thank you for all the public servants who serve this great community. We thank you so much for that blessing. Father, we ultimately thank you for the blessing of your Son, Jesus, the blood that binds us all together and that cleanses us of our sins. Jesus, thank you for being willing to go. Father God, thank you for being willing to give up your Son. And it's in his holy name I ask these favors. Amen.
Amen.
Please join us for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Be seated. Let's get into our community-related announcements. Mr. Sullivan, you have several things.
I do, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I want to share some good news with the council and the community about our sales tax. We continue to have positive information there. First of all, we're up about 4.2% over last February. We're continuing to run about 3.22% above last year's collections as of the end of February, or as of today. And more good news associated with the sales tax. We're running a little bit ahead of projection as well. For the month of February, that check was about 4.86% above projection. And for the year, we continue to run about 3.68% above projection. So great news there. Continue to shop Midwest City. Reno Swim and Slide early bird season passes go on sale on Monday, March the 2nd. Believe it or not, pool will be open for business shortly, in a figurative sense. Cruise In for Coffee 2020 kicks off on Saturday, April the 18th. We do that at the Santa Fe on Southeast 29th. Come by on Saturday mornings and enjoy some coffee and donuts and look at an assortment of very nice classic automobiles and motorcycles occasionally. Save the date for Covered in Color. That event will be on May the 9th, and that's at Charles J. Johnson Park there in Town Center. So mark your calendar for May the 9th. Fire Department will be working with the Red Cross to canvass 2 neighborhoods in Midwest City on February the 12th. The purpose will be to install smoke detectors in homes and areas that do not have working smoke detectors. They will be bringing about 12 volunteers to work with our crews and can get the canvassing done. We'll do one area in the morning from 9 to 12, and the second will be from 1 to 3. I'm not certain of the area, Chief. Do we know yet?
We do know, but we don't advertise.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I knew there was probably a reason that was not on here. Good news to report about Mayor and this council instituted a new program. Staff is executing bulk curbside Waste pickup, we began in January. To date, we've serviced 1,756 customers. No. Mr. Streets, I think I read that wrong. I'm not saying that correctly. Yeah, would you come clarify that for me, please? I'm leaving part of it out here.
That's all right. So I left him a few notes just for context. So to date, we started the first week of January, actually the week of January 6th. We've picked up 1,753 customers. In 2019, that was over 6 weeks. In 2019, in 21 weeks at the transfer station, we serviced 1,756 customers. So what you're seeing is that we are obviously touching a lot more people, providing a much higher level of service. The quality of service is much better than what it was when they were coming to the transfer station. So I just want to make sure to illustrate that for you. Obviously, I think you can handle the areas that
the rest of it.
Yeah.
Right. Thanks for clarifying that. I understand it better now. That's a great comparison. There has been some confusion about what parts of town are being picked up each week. There is a map on our website under our solid waste, our sanitation page, but I will tell you that the week of February the 17th will be Zone 7. So if you look on that map, you find your house, you'll see what zone you're in. So Zone 7 is being serviced the week of the 17th, and Zone 8 is being serviced the week of the 24th. Those are the next two service groups that will get serviced between now and the next council meeting. Is that correct, Mr. Streets? Yes, sir. All right. That's all I have, Mayor.
Does anybody else on the horseshoe have anything to announce? Ms. Eads, you have anything?
I just wanted to compliment the Parks and Rec staff for the daddy-daughter dance. My daughter volunteered out there all day on Saturday, and she did mention that she overheard one of the parents make a comment about our event was much better than Norman's, the city of Norman's. So she said there were a lot of happy young ladies out there, and so apparently it was well attended and greatly appreciated. So,
thank you. Anybody else?
I do, Mayor.
Yes, ma'am.
This is February is the month for Girl Scout cookies.
Yes.
So we want everybody to be able to help them in the community out there, earn their merit badges and things of that nature. And also coming up in March will be the census, and want everybody to fill out the census form when it comes out.
Yes.
Just a reminder.
Very important.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Esme. Any other announcements? Well, ladies and gentlemen, now we get into the pleasant part of this this evening. We've got over the last 3 weeks, I've attended 3 retirements in the city, retiring employees that have a combination of 80 years experience with the city of Midwest City. And although the loss is going to be felt, we have a lot more employees coming up and stepping into those roles. Tonight we've got several service awards that are being given out by the Oklahoma Municipal League. Neither one of their representatives could be here tonight, so I'm going to be your MC. But basically, this is for 20 years of service. The Oklahoma Municipal League recognizes 25 years of service as we do as well. So with that being said, I'll get to it. Mr. Lonnie Gray, if you come down. There you go. That's good. This is for 25 years of service in Midwest City Police Department. I'll look around this time and make sure you're not sitting in front of me. Ron Strucker. He didn't even know shit. He is on night shift. I'll give him a break on that. count on the gallery. Thank you, Mr. Reed, for your delightful comment. John, go for it. At least you showed up. Jeffrey Holland. David Price. There he is. Back row Baptist. Voice for radio right there. Face for radio. I can't believe this one. Michael Stroh. He's dodged more bullets than anybody can imagine. Thank you, guys. Ladies and gentlemen, although I'm biased, very biased, Midwest City is blessed to have some of the best employees in the state of Oklahoma, bar none. And it's a pleasure serving with these folks, and they just do a phenomenal job every day. They come to work and they work for you, and they keep that in mind. So let's just give them a round of applause for their service. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we'll go ahead and get into the consent agenda of our evening. These items are placed on consent agenda so the council, by unanimous consent, can approve routine agenda items by one motion. If any item proposed does not meet with the approval of all council or members of the audience who wish to discuss an item, it will be removed and heard in regular order. Chair to entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. Ladies and gentlemen, we have one discussion item on the agenda tonight. Before we announce this discussion item, I'm going to ask a few favors. We've had 4 public meetings on this particular issue. We have heard, every one of the councilmen have heard all the issues that you brought forward, and we've listened. That being said, I'm going to ask that the decorum and the civility of this body be maintained, and I know you will. But once again, I must ask that we maintain the civility. I also ask that, for brevity's sake, that we've got several people signed up to talk to the council, that unless there's new issues that you want to bring forward or just reiterate, and keep your comments to about 5-6 minutes. I'm not going to hold you to that, but it would be appreciated. And again, I would appreciate the civil tone. And with that being said, are any questions or comments? Mr. Sullivan, go ahead and read the next discussion item.
D1 is PC 2012 public hearing with discussion consideration of an ordinance to redistrict from R6 single-family detached residential to SPUD simplified plan unit development governed by the RHD, which is high density residential, and C3 community commercial districts, and a resolution to amend the comprehensive plan from LDR low density residential and PSP public semi-public to HDR high density residential for the property described as lots 9 through 13, 17, and 18, block 5 of the Pine Addition.
Mr. Harlage, you have any comments?
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Sullivan. This requested SPUD is located in the original mile and encompasses 0.89 acres of lots along East Kitty Hawk and Jacobs. The applicant is Jeff Johnson. The proposed SPUD includes 6 3-story multifamily buildings. The 34 dwelling units are 1 bedroom with proposed buildings 1 and 2 showing commercial uses on the first floor. The applicant has specified in the SPUD which commercial uses could be allowed in these spaces. The requested SPUD was designed with mindful consideration of the comprehensive plan and the original mile revitalization plan. The 2008 comprehensive plan places emphasis on quality development, a range of lot sizes, choices in housing sizes, and cost and revitalizing older areas of the city through the promotion of infill and redevelopment of housing. In 2011, the city adopted the original mile revitalization plan. This plan included provisions for modern housing, a variety of housing in the neighborhood that fits the 21st century lifestyle. This plan also encouraged the city to develop demonstration blocks intended to spark investment in properties by individual property owners. The SPUD includes special development regulations and landscaping, detention, setbacks, height, parking, and on-street parking in the right-of-way. These regulations requests are discussed further in detail within this report. The Planning Commission recommended approval. With that said, I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Before you sit down, I have a couple questions to ask, and it should come as no surprise about drainage.
Okay.
Okay. On page 7 of your report, it talks about the drainage and flood control, and it states that it slopes. We're talking about the property.
Yes, sir.
It slopes to the northwest. It's okay. This is about the drainage, in particular how it's going to drain from where the proposed development is. And on page 7, it states that it's going to slope to the northwest and southwest, draining onto East Jacobs and East Kitty Hawk Drive, respectively. I've driven through there a lot over the last year or so because my grandkids go to Grandpa and Grandma's day out close by there. And I've been by there when it's dry, and I've been by there when it's wet. And the drainage there on Rickenbacker, on the 2 intersections of Kitty Hawk and Jacobs. And I know there's a city box in there, but the water stands considerably in it. And I want to bring that to the attention, because if this is approved, I know it says on here that you don't anticipate any runoff or affecting the area, but I'm not sure who would be responsible for making sure, because one of the arguments that I've heard, or one of the statements I've heard over the last couple of years when I ask about the drainage, is when you put in rooftops and concrete, the water's got to go somewhere.
Yes, sir.
Correct?
Yes, sir.
Well, it's gonna go out on the street, and it's gonna drain to those two locations. And right now, with the grass that's there or the vegetation, the water's standing as it is. And my question to you is, if this is approved, who's responsible for making sure that that drainage a block away from the development works?
Well, the applicant, when he comes through for a building permit, when and if this gets approved, is responsible for providing that information to the city engineers. They'll review that to see that it doesn't impact the surrounding property owners and under our ordinances. This has existing drainage all around it from, it already being a pre-developed neighborhood. And so they're not required to do anything above and beyond that. I'm glad that you're pointing out, especially on record, that there's an existing drainage issue down there. And if that continues, then the city would be responsible to go in and help deal with that issue at that point. That's not put on at this point, that's not necessarily put on the developer to do something about. That's something that the city, because it's an existing drainage issue. I'm not sure that it's necessarily from this property, but that's something that we can look at as the proposal moves forward, if it moves forward.
And the thing about it is, it says in your report that that's the way the water's going to go. And my concern is, I know this shouldn't come as a surprise to you, that's one of the things I pay really close attention to, and it does stand there. And I'm not saying just during torrential rainstorms. It stands there when we have a shower. So my concern is that, especially in the wintertime, if it doesn't go anywhere, it's going to become black ice, and we're going to have issues with cars there. So, like I said, somehow, if it gets passed, somebody, and I don't know for sure who would fix it, but somebody would need to look at that, in my opinion.
That black ice piece happens all the time at the intersection of Kitty Hawk and Rickenbacker now, headed towards Lockheed. It's a regular process because there's standing water there regularly.
Sorry, I thought you were complete. I might ask if the city engineers have anything further to add to that, as they're more familiar with the drainage.
My question to you is, who's responsible for that?
A proposed development's not responsible for something that's already existing there, and that's why I'm saying I'm glad to know that, and they may very well know all about that. As far as in public works, an existing issue.
Can I pause you right there for a split second? The existing 7 lots had smaller houses in a driveway. Let's just say the lot's 5,000 feet. There's 1,500 square feet of improvements. So there's 3,500 feet of grass. But developing the entire 9/10 of an acre, you're increasing the runoff. So I don't understand how you can say that it's not increasing.
So what they're required, and what I'm saying by that is this is an existing development, and so there was pre-development there that was running off, and so from our point, and maybe the engineers can expand on this, is now that there's another development going in there, it's not necessarily green grass development. There was development there already at one point, and so the neighborhood was developed to that point.
But in follow-up to that, Billy, the issue is with the proposed development and including the most recent addendum that includes the 7 additional parking spaces, there's that much more removal of green space from the project such that there's going to be more concrete in this project, substantially so than what we're looking at with a green field right now, correct? Which is going to intensify the runoff is what this council has learned consistently from other projects, right?
And so this is an existing development.
Right.
I'd like to hear from Mr. Bundy, though.
Sure, and like I said, we'll get one of the city engineers to speak to this.
Okay.
So when the building permit is proposed, what we'll do is we'll make them show us what is the runoff from the historical, the existing condition today, and then what is proposed, and then we'll make them detain the difference. So what is running off today will be no different than when it is developed.
So where is the detention going to occur at?
Well, most likely the detention will have to be on their property.
So considering the limitation of the properties right now that we're talking, I think, Billy, you quoted it as 0.89 acres, and we're talking about 5 buildings plus parking there in less than 1 total acre.
It would be underground, wouldn't it?
Well, the underground would be suitable if there's a vertical grade difference, if they can get it. Once they put it underground, then they can't get it back out. But a lot of times detention will be in parking lots, depending on how much water we're talking about. We do allow some detention in a parking lot. There's like a curb cut. That would be one example. Another would be like rain barrel at your house is a form of detention, so they could do a system like that. We'll let the architect or the engineer propose what they want to do, but those are some solutions.
So did I hear you say that if this passes and if they pull permits and if everything comes through, your job is to make sure no more water dumps out than what's being dumped out right now?
Correct. They'll have a detention report or a drainage report showing that the impervious surface does not cause any more drainage than the existing condition.
Well, I would just like to know this, that we know that, how long have you all known that there's been a problem with the drainage there where the water is setting? Because that seemed like that should have been addressed at some point in time with the water laying there, settling at the Kitty, whatever the, well, that particular
Kitty Hawk and
area.
Rickenbacker by the First Baptist Church?
Yes, and it seemed like that should have been addressed some time ago, but now with the development, is that going to cause the development to try to, they have to go in part with what's going on existing, or they have to maintain their own drainage if it is permitted?
I'm not familiar with the existing condition, the drainage problem out there.
Okay.
That might be something we have to work with Public Works on and look into. I'm not familiar with it because it's not necessarily reported to engineering.
Mr. Bundy, there's a variety of issues throughout the original square mile, and those of you who live in the area understand it. There have been a variety of conditions develop over the decades where we've lost curbing, which transfers water to where it's supposed to go. There have been a lot of overlays of concrete in the area that dam things up at intersections, and it has always been the plan of any revitalization to the infrastructure that's done there to correct those issues as we go, such as some of the bond money and some of the special money that we're going to spend on street improvements in that area over the next couple of years. As we fix those streets, those issues will be addressed as we do the reconstruction. But they are, yeah, you're right, Councilperson Eads and Mr. Byrne, those conditions exist in several locations throughout the original mile.
And so candidly, for the members of council, just because I have particular knowledge about this area because I live basically 5 houses down from where this project is proposed, when there is a semi-heavy rainfall, there is a track running on both the north and south sides of Kitty Hawk that is approximately 2 to 3 feet wide. It looks like you could jump on a slip and slide and ride it all the way back to the west. And the flow gates that are down by the Baptist church a lot of times are covered with debris, yard waste, limbs, leaves. It plugs those and it allows that water to continue to pool. It's the same thing with the curb cuts, if you will, Mr. Sullivan, if I use the wrong term,
correct.
help
No,
me.
you're correct.
But they're adjacent to Rose Field type of thing. Trash flows into those, they back up, they don't flow correctly, you know, so there's existing problems in the area already that are significant.
You're correct, Mrs. Eads. And that's a routine part of Public Works operations, especially after heavy rain events. They have a regimen. They know where the troubled areas are that get stopped up with vegetative debris, and they send crews to clean the storm sewer grates and different types of infrastructure off so that the water can flow properly. That occurs all over Midwest City, especially in some of the areas where we have a highly dense urban forest, and you get a lot of vegetative debris that winds up in the gutters of the streets and washes down in a high rain event.
it's just part of doing maintenance. You have to go clean those grates off and get the water flowing back again. That's just part of it. Yes, that's correct.
But, you know, the problems that are there now, I understand it's not the developer's problem. You know, he's just required to make certain that his runoff don't exceed what it is historically. I'm more worried that they hold him to that, and it's fair, and I know they'll do that, but they just, that Billy's comment, the only one that kind of bothers me is he said that these were pre-existing lots, but they just got to account that, you know, only 2/10 of each lot was being consumed by driveway or house. So if they factor that in and they hold back his historic runoff, I think that's all you can ask the developer to do, as long as they require him to do that.
Yeah, and we have to wait to see what they propose on this to see that if it meets regulations, and we often jump out there and say, hey, we're going to do this, this, and this, and they come back and propose something a little bit different. It's like, oh, well, that meets code too. The deal is when they bring in should this pass, when they bring in a development plan, when they bring in that, we will evaluate it to see if it meets code, what the codes are, is what the deal is.
So even if this passes tonight, there's a lot of overlook that the city's going to do to make sure that they're held to standards. So this isn't just, I'm saying this for everybody out there, this isn't the end all be all. We're going to make sure if this passes you guys, that everything that we've talked about will be done.
Yes, yes, sir.
Well, and no disrespect intended, but at the same time, like, if that was a foolproof system, collectively on this council, we wouldn't have dealt with all the drainage problems that we've dealt with in additions that got developed previously.
And those are what I call sins of our fathers, and that's why we're dealing with them, hoping that they understand, they being staff.
Right.
And that we are looking ahead 20, 30 years down the road to make sure that we aren't putting issues like this on future generations of residents or staff or council.
And I think that's why we're asking the questions that we're asking, irrespective of the fact of those issues haven't come up yet, and there will be additional oversight, but we want to know the answers to those questions to the best of our ability to ensure that those are being addressed based upon, if you will, your verbiage, the sins of our fathers that we've dealt with previously.
I think Pat has gotten staff's attention when it comes to drainage.
Yes, sir.
Sorry.
I have a question follow-up. So one of the issues that concerns me also that's been raised, and I think you all have heard it from some of the town meetings the town hall meetings that was raised, was the issue about the current infrastructure, not just the drainage aspect, but for example, the sewer line. This project as proposed does not require any upgrades or updates to the sewer line, correct?
Correct.
And our sewer line there is very old. A lot of the lines that tie into it are clay-based. Some of them haven't been upgraded. It's the city's main. But should this project and the inclusion of the additional buildings and the high density at 34 units plus commercial cause a burden to that line and it becomes problematic, that's going to be the city's to pay for also, to repair or replace, correct?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. So when there's been comments made about, again, this project is without city investment, it may require city investment as a result of the project in the future. If we have to do things like replace the sewer line, if we have to do things like things with the drainage and so forth, it may be something, and Mr. Bundy, I'm kind of more directing this to you in fairness, it may be something that can be addressed as far as with the developer on the project as it's proposed, but it can also be something that the city has to participate in or contribute to.
So when the developer comes in and starts tapping those sewer lines, for example, or the water line, and let's say they are clay and they do start disintegrating when they're tapping in, we would require or work with the developer to replace that section of sewer line. I'm not certain how often that has happened, but they would need to make sure that at least their section of the sewer line is.
But not the city main is what I'm saying.
Well, I'm talking about the city main.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Yeah,
okay.
The city main.
Okay.
Ms. Eads, you're exactly right, and I will tell you, and we can have our assistant public works director, who's also an engineer, speak to this matter if you want more detail. But one of the areas in the city that we've been very aggressive in replacing sewer lines is in the original square mile, and that infrastructure is aging, and that's why we've put most of our emphasis. We use a technique called pipe bursting, which is a very low impact type of construction. And I won't go into all the details, but we know that we are going to need to continue that program over time, and we budget money each year to revitalize that old system, and we continue to be aggressive doing that, yes.
Any further questions for Mr. Harless?
Parking, while he's up there, we might as well hit the parking.
Ball's in your court.
Susan, you started with this. Why don't you voice your opinions? Why don't you voice your opinions on parking, and I'll step in.
So the concern that I have with parking is, and I spoke with Billy about a question that I had with this afternoon, and I understand with the SPUD proposal, consistent with our ordinances, we have some discretion, if you will, to be flexible with some of the requirements. But with what I've seen with previous projects and what I've heard in all the discussions that have been had on this project to date, there's basically an average equation of there's going to be 34 units in this project as proposed, and there's to be 1.5 parking spaces per unit. Billy, am I on track with that so far? Okay. So the calculation that I get from that is there should be 51 parking spaces available to cover those units then, based upon that calculation. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Okay. So, and I understand as proposed, if I did my math correctly, that there is 52 parking spaces in the most recent proposal to be addressed?
I think there's 53.
Is it 53?
51 regular, then 2 handicap.
Okay, I'm sorry. And I may have, there was a van handicap versus 2 other handicaps, so I may have not,
Okay.
I may have lost something in there. So let's use 53. However, part of that proposal for 53 spots includes on-street parking, correct?
Correct.
So to get that calculation, you've got on-street parking involved, as well as you've got a taking away, once again, as I alluded to earlier, of some of the landscaped space or green space, which could also affect the runoff in this project, in order to accomplish that 53 space calculation for parking, correct?
Right, I believe the applicant did that after the last meeting to help meet
Address the parking concern.
address the parking.
Okay. But there's also no specific layout, if you will. There's no consideration that's been made for any parking for the commercial spaces. I mean, there's no, the 1.5 cars assumes that if you have a 2-bedroom, you don't have 2 cars per family. And a lot of people have a second car or have a significant other, spouse or child or something that may be there visiting extended periods, and so if you multiply that across those lots, to me, from a logical perspective, it's pretty easy to see how you could fill up all of those spaces, and then you're left with more parking issues, plus the commercial piece where there's seemingly no parking calculated for that. Now, I think everybody's had the opportunity to review the parking review, video review, where select clips were done and compressed together that Midwest City PD did. The traffic study has been online that was done in the neighborhood. And I understand, those reports or those videos. I've also heard lots of constituents speak to the issue about the concerns of the traffic flow and the problem with parking that is prevalent throughout the original mile. The reason why I'm raising this also is the part that has been touched on in some of the town hall meetings but isn't really being addressed in this is when you look at these studies in a vacuum, like the October 1st traffic report says, Kitty Hawk has a posted speed limit of 25 miles an hour and carries an approximate average daily traffic volume of 975 vehicles per day in the area. Rickenbacker Drive, same speed, average of 875 vehicles per day. Jacobs Drive is a 2-lane. Its posted speed limit is 25 miles an hour and carries 175 vehicles per day. But the thing that we also know about these is Kitty Hawk and Jacobs to a lesser extent are thoroughfares, if you will, from the east to the west in the original mile for kids to walk to school. There are also thoroughfares in general for pedestrian traffic, people who are walking their dogs, et cetera. So, like the traffic engineer and the parking studies seem to indicate, okay, well, it shouldn't be a problem if we add the volume of traffic and we add the volume of parking to this. But it's not really taking into consideration the pedestrian aspect and the fact that the pedestrians have no place to go because we have no sidewalks on Kitty Hawk. We have no sidewalks on Jacobs. So, you know, we recently submitted to the Traffic Safety Commission, I probably said that acronym wrong, I'm sorry, but a request to put a four-way stop sign in at Marshall and Kitty Hawk because of the number of accidents that we'd had there and the near miss accidents and the fact that kids cross right there going to the Midwest City Elementary School. And I bring this up because I'm asking for this council to take this into consideration with regard to when we're looking at these issues on parking and do we have this quote unquote solved or do we not have this solved. If this project were something besides SPUD, if it were a situation where we were dealing with a specific commercial project, for example, not that many months ago we had a Dollar General store project and we spent quite a bit of time, if council members will recall, hashing through the parking aspect of that project because we have set requirements for that. You know, we're not talking about any set requirements for parking for commercial associated with this project. And I understand that it's only proposed to be 2 commercial spaces, if you will, but it's not being considered or addressed. The pedestrian traffic and how that is affected by this additional traffic, by the lack of parking, and the need for additional parking that to me is a clear potential is not being addressed. And Billy, correct me if I'm wrong, but if it were a different proposal, a different zoning proposal, like a different commercial project or something along those lines, there would be very set requirements to consider whether it met those or it didn't meet those as to whether we would consider approving it for rezoning to that denomination. Is that correct?
Well, it's a multiple part question here, and when we have somebody apply for something that's C3 zoning, such as a Dollar General or something, and actually one of the Dollar Tree stores or something up here on 10th Street actually did get did go under a SPUD and get get some relief from parking and do some shared parking. And so hopefully I'm answering your question here that PUDs or SPUDs, SPUDs are just small PUDs. They are modified regulations for development. I know in some of our committees that we've had, we've talked about bonus zoning and these things that are out there to try to work with developers and builders. But when you're marrying several things together, several uses together, such as housing and something as the retail that's possibly at the bottom of these, it's often shared parking in these cases. I've heard the applicant saying many times that that his target is the neighborhood. He's not trying to bring people in different cars for this area. It's to service the neighborhood. We often refer to it as blended parking because we've done this in so many different areas throughout the city under these to when you have shared uses, because it's not specific as to what is going to be going on there, and so the staff looks at the guidelines that are in the parking requirements and adjust it from there.
I'm sorry, sure. Just really quickly. The shared parking that you're talking about, in this proposal that I saw, one of the things that was considered, and one of the gentlemen who I believe is in the audience tonight that was at one of the previous town halls spoke up about the possibility of shared parking with First Baptist Church right at the corner of Lockheed and Kitty Hawk. But I don't see that that's part of the proposal to do shared parking with the First Baptist Church. Am I understanding that correctly?
That was not brought to this application. I don't know where it's at with that.
I have a follow-up to what Susan's saying. And if I heard you right on the water, the drainage, and the sewer, that if this passes, this is step 1. They have to bring a developmental plan, and that at that point, the city engineer is going to look at it and see if the drainage is adequate, the sewer lines are adequate. Is that correct? Did I understand?
They'll have to bring it through for some plating.
Okay. So let's say the third spoke on that wheel is the parking. Is there a checks and balance on the parking issue if this comes through, that we get, he comes in with the plan, the developmental plan, actually, instead of just basically a rough draft, because that's not the official deal, correct?
Right, that's not the official.
Okay, so he brings in the developmental plan, and we pass this tonight, and it goes on to the next step. And then he comes in and he brings us a plan. Where does that leave us, Ms. City Attorney, too, if it gets to the point where we can look at the numbers and based off of what her concerns are, we don't think it works? Where does that leave us? Do we stop it, or what do we do?
What we do, and this is traditionally what we do, is we use this as a guideline going forward with the development. So they bring the proposal in and they lay out their plans on, hey, this is what we're looking at doing. We started looking at the numbers and we can do this and push and pull a little bit here. But as long as they're following within these guidelines that are laid out, and anything that you add specifically to this from here on out should it go forward, if it varies from that very much, and there's some guidelines that as director that I have to either bring it back for review or go forward. So like if they're increasing, if they come up and show another building, then I'm going to say, no, we can't do that. If you want to do that, you have to go back through the process again. You're amending this too much. If they come in with the parking shaped a little bit different, or they do something just a little bit different, I'll decide then whether, and under those guidelines, because they're spelled out, that we move forward and we get together and talk about that with staff and the city manager.
If this passes and he comes back and wants less parking than what is allowed by code, you're not going to say yes, are you?
No.
Okay.
Can I chime in here for a second?
Wait, I'm sorry, can I get a clarification? No, you're not going to say yes, or I'm lost? Because my understanding
was,
because
will he allow, sorry folks, I wasn't turned on. Will Billy, on his own, without ever bringing it back to the council, allow for less parking than what is there by code now? And his answer was?
So if this proposal comes back, because this has been such a sensitive deal, I would say that it has to go back for review through starting with the planning commission on something less than. And I think this is, if it does passes, you'll need to be very specific. Is it 51 or is it 53 parking places? Because his letter says 51.
That, I'm just thinking, if this passes, can it go through as something that not allowed less parking than what's per code per one-bedroom apartments? Could we make it that specific?
Yeah, but the issue is going to be, Sean, is what commercial comes in there too, because that's going to add on top of the one-bedroom apartments.
Right, and that's not contemplated right now, based upon the calculations.
I might be able to
which is not uncommon.
touch on that a little bit. I spent some time with Billy today, and just on the parking the way it is now, there's the parallel spots, the plan's showing 18 feet 8 inches, I believe. And the code's supposed to be around 22 feet. I think the ones out front are 25 feet. So I'm already seeing a shortage on the parallel spots, but Billy keeps reminding me that he still has to bring it in. He has the chance to adjust it, and I understand that. But even as a developer side, I mean, I'm sure Jeff's looking at this. You don't want to get real far down the road. And I told him, you don't want to get, and then, well, the main boulevard, I see it's 24 feet, but I think code is 26 to make it safe for fire. And so we keep going down the road, and it gets to where it's changed drastically. He has to stick with 26, and then on one of them, the parking lot goes straight to the property line, and the cars to park properly, they're going to be right up against the fence. I mean, there goes the fence. But if you're not careful, these cars are going to be sticking out into that 24, 26-foot lane, and it's going to be a hazard. But Billy keeps assuring me that it's all going to be approved based on how many units. It's 1.5, right? 1.5 cars
What they're
per-
proposing is 1.5 unit
Per unit.
Per unit, and if that's what you want to say, that'd be good, that'd just be fine.
And then one of the other discrepancies I'm seeing on the two, where the 5 buildings are, type B buildings, the downstairs of that is roughly 1,500 feet on each one of them. And he's saying that there's gonna be roughly 800 square foot of retail on each building. Okay? But then they're not taking any parking. The general rule is, I think it's for every 100 feet or 150 feet, there's what, 1.5 parking, or 1 parking spot for every 150 feet? Something like that. So, but they're saying they want to share. Not all the residential people are going to be there at the same time. Maybe all the business customers would be there. So the shared concept may very well work. But I see a shortage on, there's still 1,600 feet in each building B and of buildings type B. So if that area grows retail-wise, then I see that there's really a shortage on parking, especially if they stick with the 26 alley on the main boulevard. If they stick with, that has to be 26 feet, then he's going to be crowding. It's just getting too congested to get the number of parking spots that he wants. But I'm okay, like you said, as long as the city sticks with some rules, and they don't just keep squeezing this thing down where, you know, my fear is, I mean, it's a great project, but it's just trying to put so much in such a small area that the last thing we want is it to be, you know, a real congested parking lot and troublesome. I know Jeff doesn't want that either, but I'm a little concerned how tight it is. But
in follow-up to that, here's another question that I have too, and I apologize because I'm not really great with these schematics. But the last schematic that was submitted, the entrance/exit to the project, there's one on Kitty Hawk and there's one on Jacobs, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so in the traffic collision report, it says a full access driveway on Kitty Hawk and a full access driveway on Jacobs. So will there be ingress and egress both from those driveways, or is it one-way traffic flow through there?
It would be two-way traffic at
Okay.
26 feet. The applicant could go to one way and reduce that down significantly. Then
Okay.
we'd have to clear that through the fire department.
Uh-huh.
The fire department, and I cannot speak for them, but that they put out their minimum for what they have, and through the development, again, through the permit process, they may very well permit under the guidelines or under the regulations something different.
And one other clarification question and follow up to what Jeff said. So the fire lane minimum width is 26 feet, correct? That's what's in the report at page 8?
Right, that's
Okay.
what's in the report.
But the proposal for this is 24 feet, correct?
Yes.
So it's 2 feet less. And that doesn't include, like I say, any of the aspects of off-street parking. And if you have, for example, I'm sorry, I'm going to use you as an example, Jeff, because you're one of those folks that drives a gigantic pickup truck. And, you know, perhaps, you know, some folks who aren't great at parallel parking, for example, they park a little bit over. It's been one of the issues in Oklahoma City with the trams hitting cars and taking off the side mirror. I mean, we're already 2 feet narrower than what the fire lane is required to be. And if you take on-street parking and you have a vehicle that holds to the street side as opposed to the curb side, you've got another impairment with regard to emergency vehicles.
Well,
Okay.
you open that up by moving the parking off street, you're not gonna have two cars parked right across from each other on the street. You're gonna have one that will be parking the off-street parking.
Says who, though? Oh, I'm so sorry. Says who, though? Because there's no prohibition to park on the opposite side of Kitty Hawk.
Yeah, but there's no prohibition right now. You can have two cars parked across from each other, just like
Correct.
this, and have very room. If you've got off-street parking and you have a car parked off-street and a car parked here, you have more room for fire trucks and ambulances and garbage trucks than you do now when two cars park like that. You have 22 extra feet where that off parking is going to be. So if you've got 25 feet as a regular driveway, I mean, regular street, so if you've got.
26.
How many?
24, 25.
So if you've got 22 feet or whatever it is of off-street parking, you've basically made this 26 plus 22. And so those cars that would park off-street are actually going to free up that spot.
Okay, but let's think this through for a second. One of the proposed commercial uses for this project that's been discussed is a coffee shop, okay? And one of the issues with coffee shops is also the hop-out process. All the street parking is taken. This happens downtown all the time. So I'll just sit here
Double park.
and double, to use your phrase, Vaughn, double park,
Well,
let my passenger hop out and run in, okay?
So then
Maybe
you
a
would
couple
have
people
this-
do that.
Then you would have the same congestion that you have now when two cars are parked on opposite sides of the street. Because they would be parked where the curb used to be, and you'd have a car parked across, you'd have what you do now, because that parking has moved off to the side. It's not on the street, it is off the street. So if you have somebody double parking where they're not supposed to, they're not taking up any more space than they would right now if you had two cars parked across from each other on that street.
But if you have somebody who is double parked and you have somebody who's parked across the street, because right now there's no prohibition about parking on both sides of the street in this area. If you go over on Lilac, for example, on the north side of the road, there's no parking signs posted. The city chose to post that as no parking. In particular, I think because of emergency vehicle needs when we have game day Fridays, okay? Because on that side, parking on the south side of Lilac creates congestion right there for people to be able to get through. That's why it was chosen to be that way. But, you know, I'm not great with schematics. What I see is, it looks like to me that the curb line for where this is going to sit, and again, this assumes that there's no modification to this project, because time after time, we see projects that we approve, basically rezoning, and when they ultimately get built, they have differences than what we propose, okay? So I'm also sort of saying all of this with the caveat of, I'm not sure how this is going to ultimately look in the end. But when I look at those, and what I see with a lot of parallel parking instances is that there is the ability to hold that beyond the curb line. I mean, that's what it looks like to me. Maybe I'm not reading the schematic right, and so maybe you're right, Sean, but those are what my concerns are with that.
Of all the concerns I have with this project, this has actually been my least, because it actually frees up for emergency vehicles that are larger, because you're now moving this where two people could park like this in opposite directions, one on the north side and one on the south side, and you would now have 26 feet plus two cars that are there, so you couldn't get in. You would now have 26 feet plus 22, or whatever it is, for that off-street parking. Of all the concerns I have with this one actually makes traffic flow, except in the instance that you said, which you can't control people parking dumb, and you can't control people parallel parking. But if they do, or double parking, if they do, all they've effectively done is just done exactly what you have right now. Because you have somebody parking, double parking where the curb used to be, because the other parking is moved. That's the only time that you would have what you have potentially now. Moving this by 22 feet, just free, basically you've got a street and then you've got half a street for parking width, is basically what you've got. So this was the only thing when I first saw this, is I don't like variances, and there's next very few here at this point, but this is about the biggest thing that I was really happy about, because it does free up that street for larger vehicles.
Chief Norton, could you come down and talk to us a little bit about fire trucks?
And while he comes up here, all of our processes include the fire department with each step, and they give their approval on things, so they would be involved.
Billy, do you have those specs on the trucks that the fire department's
I
applying?
did, and that's, we reviewed those, and that's why we included the statement in there that it would clear all the emergency apparatuses.
And what I'm making reference to is I requested from the fire department the specs on their new trucks to make sure that the width of the streets and the width in the parking lot would fit the trucks. And I actually went over there with a tape measure on my own, illegally parked my car on the opposite side of the street that you're not supposed to, and measured it. But I gave that information to, me doing it, and those guys doing it officially are two different stories. So I gave them the specs back and gave them my measurements were.
So ordinarily on the code, it requires the 24-foot fire lane distance. So what you're looking at coming along the back is allowing all the cars that are parked there in the 24-foot. And speaking with the fire marshal on this issue, because there were some questions, and I think and hopefully they relayed some of the stuff back to Jeff, the applicant, that with any building that goes up to 30 feet or higher requires a 26-foot per the code clearance for the fire lane. Doesn't have anything to do with the driving distance around there, but it's just the serviceability out back for the outriggers and for the basic collapse zone, which is 1.5 times the height of the buildings, the collapse zone, so the safe zone for us to be back a little bit. So, and this also with the 26 allows that work area in the room and for another apparatus to drive around the side if it needs to be. So there are some clarification on the building height depending upon if the plan comes and what it has. What you're looking at now, we don't see anything that talks about the height of the structure as tall as they're going to be. So if these, assuming that these were just 2-story buildings, the 24-foot fire lane clearance will be fine. The 22-foot turn in off of Kitty Hawk coming in is perfectly acceptable per the fire marshal, because when we get in the back fire lane, we will be able to address it from Kitty Hawk if need be, if there's a fire in the front portion, and then the back portion, the fire lane is going to be wide enough. Anything that would go up per code would have to be would fall in the 26 range.
Clarify something for me, Chief. When we're talking about fire lanes, we're not actually talking about fire lanes. We're talking about clearance in the street for the truck to get down, correct?
Fire lanes are around any businesses and commercial structures, apartment complexes and things have the red line around them.
Right.
So you'll have them between two spots that nothing is supposed to be parked in there. Theoretically, if something is parked in there and shouldn't be, then you have the right to move it to do what you need to do to get access.
But what I mean is,
it has
the 24 and 26 square feet is the requirement that you need to get your apparatus down the street and fight the fire, correct?
Not down the streets, no, sir, Mayor. The fire lane does not, the street width does not address 26 feet. This is just for if you had parking. So in other words, as you look at the schematic and the drawing, and we'll go with the parking side, you'll have a red line that goes along the back side of those parking spots that'll say fire lane. And then so the fire lane would extend from that to the curb. That's the 26 feet that you get the working area.
But there's no space on that schematic for the fire lane. Am I understanding that right?
That is the fire lane, Ms. Eads. What you're driving in is the fire lane. A lot of our businesses, you can look at them if they sit further than 150 feet back from a road right away, they're going to have a fire lane because we can't operate off of the road. Assuming that parking lot was full and they're in a setback of 50 feet, there's not going to be a fire lane on the building. So some of our convenience stores have fire lanes on them because they sit so far back off the main street that we got to have a room to get the trucks in because we only carry 200 feet of hose on the truck to do the initial attack with.
So when we're driving in a business and we see that red line painted on the sidewalk or painted on the parking lot, that is considered the fire lane?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So you can or can't park on that lane then? I'm confused now.
You can't park, but the fire lane goes from the rear of those parking spots back to the curb.
Okay.
So there is no parking. So the fire lane starts where the parking spots end, if you will. So if you pulled into that parking spot facing Kitty Hawk, the rear of your car would be outside the fire lane. The fire lane would start at the rear of your car and go back towards the curb. And then you're going to have the distance between the parking spots as you round head back towards Jacobs. You're going to have the fire lanes going to be painted on the back side of those parking spaces, and that'll be where nothing should be parked in that lane, which is basically the driveway as well.
So you mark the, on some of those parking spots that's critical near the curve, they can mark those too for like compact only, where a big truck's not parked to limit, you know, where a truck comes through. And also a question, this most recent plan has a 22-foot entrance off of Kitty Hawk. Now that is one way, right? Because I see some arrows going one way.
Correct. The 22-foot is not one, and you are correct, Councilman Moore, that anything that doesn't allow for the fire lane radius, whether it's the 22 or 24-foot that's required, or if it's for the 3-story or higher buildings for the to the 26 feet, they will shorten and put compact cars there just so you can make the turn to make the requirement.
And then on the parallel parking, again, my concern is not the double parking, but if those are stretched from 18 to 24, he's going to have fewer spots. And then also, you know, I know they're doing it a lot in Dallas and all the apartments there, but you know, if this thing gets built and filled up, you're going to have, you know, you'll probably have to do some kind of, I would think, a permit, a parking permit, a resident permit or something to where they can control some of this.
Yeah, I mean, that would be up to them to control. And as far as some of the conversations with, you know, the Friday night lights, I mean, that is the original mile. That's the original Midwest City. That's some of the smaller streets. We've just become accustomed to it. There tonight, there could be cars double parked on both sides of the road down as you go down through there. So this looks like to relieve a little bit of that pressure for us, because it appears on the print that these parking spots are inset from with the curb, the street line is right now at this current moment. So that's going to offer some relief because you'll have more room to drive through there.
Chief Claves, I hate to put you on the spot, but since your buddy there just brought it up, Friday night lights, what's your perspective on this? And I hate to tell you, but I don't know if you heard who threw you under the bus, but he's standing right next to you.
Thanks, Bert. Councilman Byrne, you know it's an issue every Friday night when we have a home football game at Rose Field. So currently, when we respond, we're able to get through, but the traffic is difficult at times. Now, I can't speak for the fire department. Obviously, our patrol cars are smaller than the fire truck, but ambulances seem to make it through. We make it through, but I don't know about fire. But it's an issue down there on Friday night.
Okay, how do we, let's say a year and a half from now and this project's built, what do we do for the homeowners that live over there on these two main streets when there's limited parking and they can't get in and out of their driveway? I mean, and how, what do we do? I mean, and I could, you know, I've dealt with it before, but it's not my responsibility to enforce that in Midwest City. And I know it's a no-win deal, but we somehow we have to assure these people that we're going to look out for their best interest when we know 4 or 5 nights a year it is a mess, and that could be the most important night of the year for that one resident.
So Councilman Byrne, we've addressed some of this issue with the school, because along with the expansion of Rose Field there, they moved the concession stand and did some rearranging there. The press box, they also took some parking spots that's already in a small parking lot. One of the preliminary plans is that where Jarman is now, and there's a bunch of discussions going around that I don't know anything about, but the one that I had been around with was that the parking for the Friday night light situation would be taken care of with the potential of some parking spaces in that current area once the school's combined and moved over here, that the ball fields and stuff in that area will be able to take care of for parking spaces.
Well, back to your original question, Councilman Byrne, I can't assure you that all issues will be resolved, but it's through education, engineering, and enforcement. We'll obviously enforce when there's issues down there on Friday nights. Education is a key aspect too for us, and engineering also. And so, you know, it's been that way since Rose Field has been there, and we managed on Friday nights, but it's a concern for us. It always has been, probably always will be.
And I realize nobody wants their car towed, and we certainly don't want to get in the business of towing a bunch of cars, because a lot of these people aren't going to be from Midwest City, and then you're putting somebody from a small town afoot. But I would hope that I trust that you will get ahead of this and make sure that we have a plan in place to deal with this. And education is huge, to let the people know that you can't park in front of these people's houses in the driveways, because they have to be able to get in and out.
Absolutely.
Well, you know,
Can I ask a question, then what exactly is going on? I'd like to, excuse me, what is happening now for you all for you to control this problem? You say it is always, it's a problem, so what do you do now?
Well, we respond to any complaints,
Okay.
Ms. Allen, if we get traffic complaints. We have officers at the field at every home football game also, have people in the area for special emphasis. Some of those areas are marked. I can't tell you which ones where there is no parking on one side of the street, but you know, we have to monitor it, and if there's an issue, if a citizen calls us, we respond. I've got Lieutenant Cruz back in the back here. He's one of the people that respond to those calls, and we certainly try not to cause any problems for people who are out of town by impounding their cars, hopefully get them to move, but
Okay.
you know, it's something we respond to when we get a complaint.
Okay, and so if this project was to go forward, you have some type of plan also to control that particular school event where people park in the, do they park in front of the homes or something? Is that what happened?
They park all over the place.
All over
I
the
mean,
place.
and literally to the point that.
So they're doing it now?
Correct,
so-
both sides of the street, and one of the
So-
things about this field has been open for years. It's been vacant where this proposed project is. People park all over that dirt right now for home Friday night games.
Okay, and so you all control that? Is that something you was working in that particular area, or they just park there? It was just...
Ms. Eads is right. They park there where it's a vacant lot. They do.
Okay.
So they're going to, as Fire Chief has said, there are some plans in place
Okay.
with Middale Schools. We don't know what's going to happen, but hopefully with the way they've reconstructed the stadium,
Good.
there'll be more parking available, we hope. And then there may be some other options with Jarman Middle
So-
School when they close it down also.
So is that the assumption that the school understands, is that project go forth, they pretty much want to be available for the overflow, pushing back the concession stand and making parking available?
Councilwoman Price out, they'll end up, anytime they do anything,
Mhm.
they do submit for permits through Billy's department, and Billy does the parking lot stuff and monitoring on those to making sure that adjustments that are made are,
Okay.
gonna have adequate parking spaces, even for recreational facilities or athletic
Okay.
facilities. Billings group does monitors all that stuff.
Thank you.
One of the things, and if there was a problem, if this were to be approved, again, permits, and I've seen in a lot of cities, the parallel spots, they can paint something out in that spot, and it's resident parking only. So, and if there's a problem, I would think that even in front of these houses right across the street, I mean, I don't know if you're gonna allow double-side parking, but if it's, I can see other homeowners taking advantage of his parallel spots and it going both ways, but the city could monitor that with permits and mark the location, and if there's someone parking in a permitted area, police department can write a citation.
Well, that's not
he has
really the
already
way it
said
works. It's going to be up to the developer and the management company, number one, to issue those permits. The police department's not going to get involved in that. But
Well,
what
I'm
the
just
police
saying-
department can do is, if somebody's not permitted to be in a space, then whoever the development company is or the oversight could call the police department and have the vehicle towed. Second thing, right now obviously with the field being vacant, the police department doesn't have any authority to go on that field and tow cars because it's private property, unless, of course, the owner came forward and asked that to be done. Another object that we're going to have to look at, and you brought it up, Ms. Eads, is that we're going to have to go down through Jacob, Kitty Hawk, and probably a couple other streets to reevaluate the parking and make parking unlawful on one side of the street or the other, and during certain times. I mean, there's a lot of ways that we can engineer that, but it's going to have to be a holistic look at the whole parking situation. One thing is not going to solve all of the parking issues. And having patrolled down there during Friday night lights, I know it's a bear, and I've towed a bunch of cars that were parked on sidewalks, blocking driveways and what have you. But it's going to have to be a holistic approach, not only by the developer, but also by the city as well.
One other item, and I know it got brought up, and I know Mr. Johnson said he was aware of it and would deal with it in the last public meeting, is the construction vehicles coming and going if this was being built, because that in itself is going to add to the issues there, because the bigger the trucks, the more space. So that is enough. If we're going to look at this holistically, just like the mayor just said, that's another spoke in that wheel that we're going to look at.
Construction.
Okay, to move this along.
Okay.
Is there any more questions for Mr. Harless about parking or any other issues in regard to his report?
I have one question in follow-up. The on-street parking, I couldn't read the schematic. Those parking spaces, how long are those parking spaces and how wide are they on there, Billy? The ones that are on street off of Kitty Hawk?
I think they're approximately 20 feet.
No, they're 8.5 feet wide and 18 feet 8 inches long. And that's what I was saying, they're supposed to be 22.
Okay, could you do that one more time, Jeff? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
6.5 feet wide.
6.5
feet? Was it 8.5? 8.5 wide.
8.5 wide.
18.8 long, I believe.
18.8 wide, or long?
Long.
Sorry. And they're supposed to be 22, is that what you said?
That's what we was talking about earlier, 22 to 23.
So, and then one more, sorry. When Chief Norton was speaking, I understood him to say that the entrance was 22 feet wide into the development or the proposed development. And so, Chief, you left me, but I'm pointing at you in the back, I'm sorry. So, at 22 feet, is it possible to get the fire trucks into the project density? And I understood that the original proposal included like up to 3 stories on these buildings. I mean, are we going to have a problem?
No, ma'am. You see coming in off of Kitty Hawk, the 22 feet doesn't allow for any parking on there.
Uh-huh.
So that'll be, not to throw my good friend Chief Claves under the bus, but that we're going to have to, you know, and even the property owner to make sure that cars are not, there'll be no parking zones posted there and stuff, but our trucks will be able to get in there. And you'll see even as the egress goes out towards Jacobs, it'll stay the same width because parking comes all the way. So it'll be the 24, if it's not taller than 30 feet, then it'll be 26 all the way out the fire lane.
Okay. But if the height goes to 30 feet, then it has to go to 26 feet.
30 feet or greater, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Sorry, Chief. Thank you. I apologize.
And I would ask that moving forward, should there be a motion made to go forward, that we say that the minimum parking would be 51 spaces or whatever. That's what the applicant put in for that. That way staff is clear. And as you can see through these discussions, depending on what buildings are built, where they're at, the requirements change. And that's why we don't try to get too awfully hung up on this, but that we just meet minimum requirements that are out there that for the regulations, or instead of tying it to one particular thing.
Did you just say 51 spaces in Woodhouse?
51 spaces because that's what he put in his letter, in his application, and that whether it's 51 or 53, but 51 is what he's requested, and when we hear from him, he might change that. But and the other was that we start tying things to a site plan to specifically 22 feet or 26 feet or something like that, and they come in and change the plan. Next thing I know, we've got to come back and review it again and go all through this because we didn't have the foresight to know that the architect was going to change something up just a little bit. So I just follow minimum standards. That's what I'm getting at.
Before Billy gets away too, I was wanting to bring up the
So,
trees.
hold on a second. So you said to make sure it follows minimum standards or
So we speak for the fire department, and it changes whether it's 2 stories or 3 stories, so that give the fire department a chance to review it through the process instead of saying this has to be 22 feet or this has to be 26 feet. The fire department is going to review it and permit what's permissible under their regulations.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Moore.
Well, and then Sean mentioned that there's really not many variances on this. And I know a lot of times you got to have a lot of variances. Nothing ever works exactly just, you know, without a variance, but the trees and the green space, you know, I see a pretty big variance on that. And again, that's just to accommodate more housing and more commercial. But the green space has been squeezed down considerably.
Yeah, and the part of the green space was done at the request at some of the meetings. When you look at it per the residential, if the residential was to come in, there would be 16 trees, and I think the applicant has 18 trees proposed under this, so it's actually an increase, and then 36 shrubs is what they propose. Now, you know, it's a shame that we had to reduce the green space, because I'm about green space, but to meet the demands of the meeting, that's what the applicant's done.
And how many?
The applicant said that he would be, whatever trees he's not planting, he would plant somewhere else in the city to make up for it?
I don't recall that. He certainly can ask him.
But according to our conversation earlier, if this would have been a straight zoning multifamily, there would have been 6 trees per unit? Per building. You know, and I know you guys are saying, you know, if this was residences, you'd only have to do 1, and he's doing more. But I look at it as one building's going to have 6 kitchens or 5 kitchens or whatever. It's really 5. So is it residential? One building would have 5 or 6 trees, or is it 1? But and I just wanted to point out that there is a pretty big give on green space.
Yes, sir.
Okay, are there any further questions for Mr. Harless? Mr. Harless, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask for a variance, that we recess for 5 minutes for a restroom break, and then we'll reconvene in 5 minutes. consideration. Unfortunately, that happens when you get older.
Yes.
Okay, once again, we have a number of people that have signed up to speak to council. Again, I would ask that you keep your comments pertinent to the Bellum project and your concerns. We have all of council have heard all of the issues, and we just got through discussing a lot of the issues on the horseshoe. So with that being said, I'd ask Ms. McNew to come address the council. When you do come to the podium, I do need to ask you to state your name and your address just for the record. And again, thank you all for your patience.
I'm Kim McNew, and I live at 204.
You can pull the speaker down.
Oh, sorry. I'm Kim McNew, and I live at 204 East Jacobs. That's right across the street from the Bellum project. And so a lot of this I was going to address the parking. And actually, the parking that's actually going to be on site is only 42 parking spaces. And I wanted to know, I know that at the last town hall city meeting, he said they're all going to be one bedroom. But last night on the Nextdoor app, it actually still says 37 bedrooms. And if it's still 37 bedrooms, the minimum parking is 57 spaces, not 51. Because it says two parking spaces per 2 bedroom.
So he said at the last meeting, when he can get up here and talk, but he said he's not having any 2 bedrooms whatsoever.
That's what he said, but last night on Nextdoor app, where they had the, I don't know, they had
The last schematic shows it on there, whether that's an error or not. It says 34 units, but 37 bedrooms.
So
okay, but
I
that
thought
was
we'd address the fact that regardless of how many, if it's 5 apartments or 37 or 34, that he was going to have to stick with proper requirements in zoning.
Okay, I'm just saying the minimum parking, according to what was on Nextdoor app last night, is 57 parking spaces. And him having the off-street or the on-street parking is actually a variance. And then what I'm hearing, even though on-street parking is a variance, I guess his parking spaces are still a variance because they're shorter than what they're supposed to be. So I wanted to bring that up. At the Neighborhood Association meeting on August 19th, I asked you, Mayor Matt Dukes, and you confirmed that there's also a minimum for retail and commercial parking, and you confirmed that there is, and I'm not sure what that is. So compounding this already overcrowded parking issue are the adjacent planned businesses, which will require further parking for the employees and the customers. And so I want to know where the employees and the customers are going to park. And it's my understanding that one of these businesses will be serving alcoholic beverages. It's in here where he's asking for that. And alcoholic beverages are usually served after hours. So that's usually when the parking will be fully occupied by the residents, as most of people are home in the evenings. And then the added congestion with the high school events, such as football and track events, and the church events. So when you add whatever parking is needed for the retail sites, the actual minimum parking is quite a bit more than 57 spaces. So I personally do not see how the parking is fixed. By way of comparison, Shalotsky's, that is a sandwich shop on Air Depot, it's a single business and it only has 4 apartment units. Yet if you count the parking spaces, there are 37 parking spaces right there. So we already have parking happening in the streets, and more parking in the streets, of course, occur in front of our homes on football game nights. And I brought pictures so that y'all can see. This is Jacobs on football game nights. And this is East Kitty Hawk on football game nights. These two.
Can you bring them up here and let us see?
So I want to address the parking study that was done. It was an in-house, non-scientific study done during non-business times. In the memo dated November 19, 2019, from the Assistant City Manager to Billy Harless regarding the original mile Bellum parking survey, it states, "We do not want two things on the video, Friday night home football games or Sunday morning church service times." It asked them not to put those two times in the parking study.
Can you tell me how many nights a week? I mean, how many nights does this happen?
The football game nights, I don't know, it's just during football season, but then you also have track events. Then on Sunday morning, you have Sunday morning church. We
And
also
the church
have.
doesn't have parking for itself?
They do.
Excuse me.
But they don't have enough parking.
Okay.
We also have parking occurring in front of our homes when you have funerals or when you have weddings. There's parking on the streets because there's not enough parking already at the church events. That's why in the memo, I believe, that he stated, we do not want two things on the video, Friday night home football games or Sunday morning church service
And
times.
that home games you have, how often a year?
Approximately 5 a year.
5 a year, okay.
Also, during times of dropping off and picking up students from the school, it also brings more traffic to the neighborhood. During that time, there's a lot, because I used to live on Kitty Hawk, I now live on Jacobs, but there is a lot of traffic that goes down the street during the morning time when they're dropping off kids, and in the afternoon. And in the afternoon, there are like tons of kids that walk down that area. And then I wanted to read this. On November 15th, 2019, the mayor wrote in the Midwest City Beacon, he wrote, "Unfortunately, parking will continue to be an issue for the original mile regardless if the Bellum development occurs or not, as the streets were platted in 1942 when 1 car per resident was the norm. So none of the streets were designed to handle the parking load that is present today. Furthermore, the Rose Field Stadium parking shortage has existed since the stadium was built and will not change as a result of development improvements in the original mile." So you're acknowledging, right, that there's already an issue in the original mile with parking? Before this even goes in, there's already an issue.
And that's why I made the statement. If we look at parking, just take parking aside, we're going to have to take a holistic approach to it. And it may, if we go down one side of the Kitty Hawk or one side of Jacob and make that no parking, then we're going to affect all these folks because they're not going to be able to park in front of their homes. So it's going to have to be a holistic approach. It just can't be one thing or another. And I acknowledge that, and I've told you that, and I put it in print. So
Yeah.
that's.
So Kitty Hawk is the main street that our kids walk and ride their bikes down to go to school. And there are no sidewalks, plus the traffic increases down Kitty Hawk during those times. Also, the mayor put in print that with the exception of Key Boulevard, no sidewalks, exist in the original mile. So children have been and will continue to utilize the streets. The development will not affect that fact. But I would like to say that you put more parking down those streets and more traffic down Kitty Hawk, it's going to be more unsafe for our kids to utilize the streets.
But I want you to recall, in the original Square Mile Reinvestment Committee, not only did we commit to taking sidewalks from Southeast 15th all the way down to East Douglas, but also I committed to you, and I'm committing to all these folks out here, that when we go into budget talks this year, then I'm committing to put street or sidewalks down Kitty Hawk to facilitate some of the issues that you brought forward. Also, Jarman Junior High closes at the end of the school year, and that traffic load is going to be non-existent on your end of the street, except for the people coming from the elementary. So those are three things I want to point out, that we're looking at the issue, and we acknowledge that issue, and we're going to try to correct it as we can.
Okay, the majority of the kid traffic that walks down the street is not Jarman Junior High. The majority of that traffic is from the elementary school.
And we're going to try to mitigate that with a significant investment on Kitty Hawk, just like and plus two, the one thing that we did not talk about in the reinvestment committee is that that's going to affect all these people that live down in Kitty Hawk, because we're going to take some of your front yard away as a result of that. And so, but that's the trade-off. And if that's in fact where this leads, then I'm committed to it. I'm as an elected official, and and when we go into budget, I'm going to ask that $200,000 be committed to that project alone.
Okay, if the Bellin project is passed, Jeff Johnson's going to be given a variance on the parking, because the minimum parking is more than the 42 parking spaces that are on site. And you also need to include and add the minimum code requirement for retail and commercial sites. He's going to be given a variance to allow on-street parking. The code says no portion of any required off-street space shall occupy or use any public street right-of-way. And of course, you know, he's asking for those 11. And now, I guess the 11, that's another variance because they're not big enough. He's asking a variance on height. The code says height shall not exceed 35 feet. And I think I heard the fire department kept saying 2-story. He's actually he's asking for 3 stories. And he's asking for 45 feet height in his spud thing.
Yes, ma'am.
So, and then of course the fire lane. He's also asking for a variance on setback. Code requires 25-foot front building line along Kitty Hawk and Jacobs, and he's only asking for a 10-foot setback on Kitty Hawk. And if you'll look at this, he's asking for a 0-foot setback on Jacobs, and it's supposed to be 25 feet. It's also supposed to be 7 feet from the east from the other houses, but he's only asking for 6 on the east side. At the town hall meetings in January, Jeff said that he has all these variances taken care of, and when we were asking him how he had them taken care of, he was unwilling to disclose how they are taken care of. So I don't think that we should blindly accept that he has found a solution to address the variances that he has requested, including and regarding the parking, the setbacks, and the fire lane that can affect the travel of the emergency vehicles. So I feel like if the city passes this project, they are not standing behind the residents of the original mile, nor their own city ordinances. So there are Ward 1 constituents here, and Councilwoman Eads is voting on behalf of them. And I hope that all y'all will give the same courtesy when your ward has issues and respect their wishes as a representative of the people. Then I just had a question. Why are we trying to compact people in Oklahoma? We have plenty of room for expansion, so why do we need such a concentration of people in an already congested area? The junior high is closing, there are no sidewalks, there's no nightlife on 29th Street, so I don't know what amenities that this project brings besides temporary housing. There is no art district unless they walk to the Huderberg Center at Rose State for a play or concert. And I'm not against temporary housing, but I am against it in the middle of single-family dwellings and within the original mile. We don't want it. The people don't want it. Jeff Johnson, he says he is staying within the face of the existing houses in the area, but the house he built on Maroney actually blends in with the other houses, but the other houses that he has put in throughout the neighborhood, they stick out. They don't look anything like the houses in the original mile. This isn't downtown, midtown, or Paseo, and it never will be. I live here for convenience. It's unfortunate that he thinks this design will attract millennials or the younger working class. The infrastructure in the original mile is in dire need of repair and upgrading. The street lights are not worth having. I fear to walk around the neighborhood, especially at night, but he thinks this is a walkable community. It's his money and his gamble. Personally, dead center of the original mile, I think it would be great to have a community park. If and when the street lights are replaced. Right now, we need street lights. It's dark in the original mile. Nothing has been accomplished other than the 2011 report and the islands, monuments, and the entrance at Key Boulevard. I wish the important things could be treated as priority like this apartment complex has been. Also, they have failed to maintain the traffic calmer at 15th and Key. Why is the original mile always the experiment? Why don't they build 3-story apartments in Oakwood East or a similar development for grandparents to walk and meet the bus of their grandchildren off the bus? Would they want to look at a 3-story apartment in their front yard? And I just have one last question. I would like to ask each of you council members who are voting tonight, if they were putting this apartment complex across the street from where you live, across the street from your home and your friends and your family, how would you vote?
Thank you, Ms. McNeil. Mr. Cochran. Is Mr. Cochran still here? Oh, here we go. And I would like to ask that we shorten it a little bit to give everybody a chance to talk, and I'll give you a wide berth, but
Let me.
I appreciate it.
My name is Richard Cochran, 204 West Marshall Drive. The last time I spoke before this council, the meeting had been, the agenda had been altered to table this item without a vote of the council. Now, I don't know if that was proper or not. I felt like it was not.
Yes, sir.
And then I hung around for hours, it seemed, possibly hours. I don't know. I didn't time it. But for the public discussion so that I could be heard.
Yes, sir.
And then you asked me to cut it off at that time, and you assured me that I would be heard at this meeting.
Yes, sir.
So I'm going to thankfully hold you to that, and
no problem.
And I'd like to just be heard on the items because they are substantial. I began by saying that I think this thing should have been rejected out of hand. It goes against the written city ordinances that you have already applied to this. You'll have to forgive me for not being too organized. I'm not feeling too well. But a SPUD is supposed to be governed by one underlying zoning classification. This clearly asks for it to be governed by two. That's not permitted in city ordinances. Where there are additional classifications applied to something, it clearly states, let me just read it. Design of the SPUD shall be governed by the regulations of only one conventional zoning district. The use regulations of the conventional zoning district can only be modified to decrease, not increase, the number of allowed uses. for instance, permitted special use permits. And the development regulations of the conventional zoning district are modified only to make them more restrictive, not less restrictive. That is clear as can be. This is not allowed for this SPUD to be governed by 2 zoning districts. Now, if there's legal counsel here for the city to tell me that I'm wrong on this, I'd be glad to hear it.
We do have a city attorney, ma'am.
I believe Mr. Harless covered what a SPUD can do earlier when he was describing the property, and part of the intent of the SPUD is to allow for alternative uses and mixed use, and that's what this particular property is.
Okay, I'm asking you to speak to this very piece of the ordinance right here.
I don't have that in front of me.
Is this, okay, well, I could direct you to it, I could hand you a copy of it, but what I'm telling you is that your own ordinances preclude this being lawful, if you will. I don't know if we can call ordinances laws, but it clearly says, as I just told you, that it should be governed by only one ordinance, or only one zoning classification. And then this application asks for it to be governed by 2. Now,
I think I may have Mr. Harless come up and explain to you, as he already did at the beginning of the meeting, what the intent of a SPUD is.
this doesn't go to intent. This goes to whether it's allowed or not. And I know what I've read this full code, so I know what the intent of a SPUD is as well. And I know it's supposed to provide for creative uses. That's true. And then you even used the term mixed use. We're really clouding the whole idea here, because mixed use is a fully different classification, okay? And it's intended to be along arterials. And mixed use would be something more akin to what Schlotsky's is. It's along an arterial, and it provides for residents above, but not on the same floor. You know, in a mixed use classification, you can't have residents on the bottom where the commercial is. This development is going to do that. So it really goes against what the intent of mixed use is as well.
I'm sorry, I'm not seeing where in the ordinance we have a specific definition of mixed use. And again, I would refer you to the director. It's a zoning classification. I'd refer you to the director of the planning commission, or the planning department, who reviewed the application and reviewed what the SPUD definition and intent was.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to direct my comments to each of the council members. and I'll read this again.
What zoning reference number are you referring to?
It is SPUD, Simplified Planned Unit Development, 226. And then if we scroll, go on down here, it's 226.4, Criteria for Simplified Planned Unit Development Review and Approval.
So 226.4 is what you're referring to?
Yes.
All right,
A, and then if you go on down to the design standards, A2 is what I read to you. Building code requirements shall not be reduced in the design of a SPUD. Now, to me, that goes to the fire protection. Really what we heard from Mr. Harless was we have to pass it to see what's in it. That's what we heard earlier. It was brought up, and really at this point it cannot be argued, drainage is insufficient. Okay, now if I was to ask for any one of y'all to submit to a little demonstration of how soil holds water, I might take a couple of milk cartons and set them up here, one of them full of dirt, one of them empty, poke holes in the bottom of them, and then pour some water in both of them, equal amounts, and have you sitting right beneath them. That soil is going to hold water. And all my life, I've known that field over there to be devoid of any houses. Mr. Harless, can you tell me when the houses were knocked down that were on there? I believe you stated there was more development. There was development on there at one time.
No, I do not know when there were some other houses on there. It's my understanding that there were.
Thank you. I've lived in Midwest City all my life. I've lived at 204 West Marshall since I was born, except for about 7, 8 years, maybe longer than that. But my parents brought me home from the hospital there. I grew up there, and at age 28, I bought that house from my parents. Okay, and I'm 57 now, 57 and a half. So I've got a pretty good handle on the situation over there in the original square mile. And the drainage, first time I became aware of the drainage problem was going to the tornado shelter at First Baptist when I was a child, and the water was up above my knees. And from all the testimony you've heard tonight, it hasn't changed any. It may have gotten worse. But to think for a minute that drainage is not an issue, that's just not good at all. And it says that it's just not required for this. Now, we also heard that the parking is insufficient. Now, when I was last here, I had a better grasp of some of this information related to parking and how many spaces are required for each apartment and for each commercial building, not building, but each commercial entity there, because that's based on square footage, I believe. And I would just want to ask is, even if it's 53 parking places that are going to be put in here, does that meet the requirements for 34 apartments and the amount of commercial according to the city code the way it's written? Can you say that that does meet code, or are we allowing less parking from what is written in this code for parking?
Well, I guess we're going to repeat all the same things about parking and stuff again, but a PUD allows for the flexibility. And as you were stating your statements earlier about the PUD and the different building regulations, at the end of it, you said as the building code, that the building code shall not be relaxed. And that is true. We wouldn't relax the building code. They're not going to be built to a different code than because of the regulation that it's in. So, you know, we covered the parking a while ago, and if you want to go back over that, the PUD allows for, or SPUD allows for mixed parking requirements.
His question was...
My question was not answered there.
That's what I was about.
He didn't address at all what I said.
Give me a second. The question was, does 34, 35, however many one-bedroom apartments he has, is the parking that he has requested, is it within code, or are we having to give a variance? That was your question, was it not?
Yes, the parking requirements are listed.
Okay, hang on a second. So that was his question. Is there a variance from code for parking based on what we're doing right now?
So what the
Number of
applicant,
parking spots.
if the applicant was just coming in for straight zoning for an apartment complex, and just the apartment complex for single family or single units, then they would meet those requirements. But under the PUD, he's asking for more than that for the also the commercial. So the 51 or 53 meets the parking requirements for the apartments, but it does not mix also with the commercial.
Okay.
So if you had them separated, they would not meet together, but together meet separate, but as together blended parking. That's why we spent a lot of time earlier talking about mixed uses and blended parking and all that. So if it was just
the answer is a yes or no, and I'm just trying to simplify this for everybody here because sometimes words get in the way. He's not asking for a variance when it comes to parking spots based on what he's brought to you. Is that a yes or no answer? Yes, he is, or no, he's not asking for a variance.
he's asking for permission to do it under the PUD,
Which
as
is,
a SPUD.
okay. But are we following through the 1.5 parking spots per
Per house, per dwelling unit, or per unit,
Okay.
yes.
That's what I was trying to get, just a yes.
But not the commercial.
If you take a 34-unit apartment complex, it's going to require X number of spaces. If you take the amount of commercial square footage that is asked for in this project as a separate item, you add the two together, you're going to come up with a number, okay? That number's higher than 53. That's what I'm saying. There's insufficient parking for this. Fire protection. Was that answer to your satisfaction? No.
Chief answered it to my satisfaction.
Yes.
The 26-foot, he clearly stated that there was not going to be a 26-foot fire lane, and that's what was required for passing that fire truck to there.
He also specified what a fire lane specifically was. He
Yes.
specified all that. He did say that everything can get up and down their fire, whatever.
We're seeing 22
That's the
feet
lanes
and
of
24 feet.
Fire marshal. Fire marshal says this is perfectly fine.
Wait a minute, wait.
And-
No, wait a minute, I don't
and
think that's a
we
fair
have to take the
characterization.
chief-
Perfectly probably is an overstatement.
But he already specified if it's not 30 feet. If it's 30 feet or more, which the original SPUD proposal was up to 45 feet for 3 stories, then it doesn't meet the standard for the fire marshal.
Do we need to call chief up here again? Because,
Absolutely.
believe it or not, whatever chief says and the fire marshal, this for the safety of Midwest City.
If you
And
look
so
at
if you say
PC
so, it is
Okay,
so.
let's, everybody settle down. Chief, would you
Chief,
please come up here?
I'm not going to dispute him on his credentials.
Christina, if you look at PC 20-12 that was in our packet, it literally outlines the fire marshal's
Please
report.
do not talk over
I'm
one
not going
another.
to discredit
Chief?
Chief, step up here, thank you.
Okay, the issue is, you heard the issue on the height. Does that change your department's requirements for egress into this apartment complex?
No, sir. The requirements as stated there, the plan that's floating around is 24 foot for the fire lane. What I saw to comment on was not knowing the heights. If it comes back and it has a 4-story apartment complex, it's going to have to be
Okay,
the 26
it's not.
feet.
It's going to be a 3-story complex.
So anything 30 feet or higher requires a 26-foot fire lane.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
And that's not what's proposed, just to be clear. It's 22 feet, and the proposal was for 3 stories, which would be over 30 feet in height.
22 feet is the drive-in.
Uh-huh.
It's fine.
Okay, but
It's fine. The proposed on to 24 feet for the fire lane is what's in code, depending if it's 30 feet or less. So I don't know, I don't see the rest of the documents that come with that. I don't have it. The fire marshal has looked over it, met with Ms. Poole, and relayed the 30 feet or higher has to be a 26-foot
Right.
fire lane.
that's what's in this
And that's
report, right?
non-negotiable, correct?
Correct.
All right.
Okay.
So the statement that was made, Bert, that you don't have all the information to answer the question is accurate.
Not in front of me right now, no. I know Dwayne has looked over these as they come through for the planning commission, met with Ms. Poole in some meetings and given the advice, the direction, just as I stated it.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Cochran.
I picked up this site plan yesterday in the Community Development Director's office. And it shows on this plan, it's updated with additional parking places. I'll get to that in just a minute. But I'd like to take up this fire lane. The gentleman with the fire department just stated that the fire lane exists between these parking places in front of building type C. Okay, that's, I presume, the main commercial building. And it's very small type, it's hard to see, but that was 22 feet. He described that as the fire lane, and it's 22 feet. It's insufficient.
That's not what he said.
With the new parking that was provided.
Kevin back, Bert, you want to address this again?
You may want to stay up here, Chief Barrett. You may want to have a seat right here with us.
Between these parking places where the fire truck would have to pass through, is that not what you described as a fire lane?
This is 24 feet listed right there as what you've picked up. So this does, Anything 30 feet or less is going to meet the requirement at 24 feet wide. The 22 drive-in coming off of Kitty Hawk is going to. So if it's 30 feet or taller, this clearance here to here goes to 26 feet.
Okay, Chief, one more time. When we're talking fire lanes in this particular project, this is the entrance from Kitty Hawk or Jacob going back behind the complex through the parking area, correct?
Correct.
That's the fire lane.
Correct.
The
And you'll
street
see
does not have anything to do with it.
Right. So you see on your measurements, you see the 24 feet goes from the very back.
So it has to be
of those-
26 feet if it's a 3-story apartment, and that's going to have to be measured between the parking spaces and wherever that cutoff is, correct?
Correct.
So that, in order to accomplish this is going to have to move, but both north and east to accomplish the 26 feet.
If the buildings are over 3 feet or 30 feet or taller, yes,
Well,
sir.
let's just assume.
Right. Yes, sir.
Okay.
And
All
my
right, thank you.
understanding, there's been information relayed on that already, so.
Can pause there for just a second. Billy, I already forgotten our conversation today. All the parking spots are showing that they're 18 feet 6 inches. Did I remember that the required is 22, or is it only 18.6?
He'll have to meet the minimum requirements.
What is the
okay?
minimum?
So it's approximately 22. So when he comes in, when they design this, no matter what he does, when they come in and design this, they'll have to meet fire department's minimum requirements, building requirements, and the requirements laid out by here. So yes, this will be pushed and pulled a little bit. If he can't meet the minimum requirements that you all set out, and if it's adopted or passed,
Hold on. We don't set the minimum requirements.
in his proposal.
For public safety, this is what I want to make very clear. Public safety is not going to be compromised. And if he says 26 feet, then it's going to be 26 feet. That's not us. That's NFPA and all the other requirements. Okay, so that's not us, Billy.
Hopefully I'm saying, being consistent with my message here, whatever the minimum requirements are, the fire chiefs, the building requirements, whatever they are,
okay,
he'll have to meet in order to do that. If he's not able to meet the length of the parking spots as they're laid out in the ordinances, then he'll have to either pick up more parking places somewhere else or reduce the size of his development. But that'll be through him and his designer to do that. We're hearing a zoning case, not reviewing a building permit.
We understand that. We
Yes.
understand that.
And so,
But we've
so if
gotten
you all-
in the weeds, we might well stay in the weeds.
Yeah, and so if you all, if
So
as a body, we say
let's
one.
Mr. Cochran finish up so we can get on down.
But just to be-
I'm sorry for the interruption.
To be
Mr. Cochran.
real clear, though, the parking spot, not the alleyway or the fire lane, but the parking spot is 22.
It will be laid out per code. It'll be reviewed
So
to
what is it,
compute.
though?
Be
That's what I'm
code.
asking.
I don't know if it's 20 or 22. We don't do
Let's,
very much parallel
let's
parking.
not get
It's
into
code.
reviewing
Well,
code.
but I just wanted to make sure I understood.
Let's stay on track and let
Some of this
these
question
people
about
get to
50
speak their mind and move on. So, Mr. Cochran, once again, I apologize for the interruption. Please go ahead.
You know, I'm unintentionally pointing up a lot of the problems with this. It's not worked out worth a hoot. This 11th hour redesign of the site plan, it happens to cut the whole front off of that building and all of the overhang on that building and 4 trees that it takes out of the plan. We've not even talked about that yet. It was real easy to just lop off the front of that building for this drawing to throw some parking places in there. And I was treated very derisively in the community development director's office yesterday when I went to ask a simple question about this and pick it up. And I felt like I was spoken to very derisively just a minute ago when he stepped up here as well about, well, let's go through the parking again.
Well, I'm sorry you feel like that, sir.
Well, you know, I'm not the only one. And I tell you, the city's doing a real they're trying real hard to sell this, it seems, and make it go. Well, there is, you know, I'm not against economic development. What you've done more than anything is mobilize a great number of citizens against it. Another matter of going directly against the ordinance is the placement of the dumpster. It's right there next to the street. Garbage truck has to pull up, staying in the street, blocking the street, and then back up into the street in order to empty the dumpster that's laid out on this plan. This should never have even been accepted. The ordinance clearly states that you cannot provide parking for this that has to back out onto the street.
And Mr. Cochran, I do want to clarify an issue. This is not the final plat. This is not the final anything. And this is a rezoning case. And for him to even go past first base, he's going to have to submit something that comes to code, period. And if it doesn't, then we've got a problem. So please don't get wrapped too much around this submission, because this is only one of several stages this thing has to go through. So please,
this is
I understand as you look at it, it doesn't meet it. But before it gets approved, it's going to have to meet our standards.
Okay.
Allowing the reclassification to SPUD is something you should never even consider, as I've stated. I want to ask Mr. Harless one other quick question.
Yes, sir.
Are there any SPUDs in the city of Midwest City presently that are governed by more than one underlying zoning classification?
To clear up something earlier, you and I have never visited my office, so ever.
No, there's somebody in your office.
Well, you said the director's office. You and I have never visited my office, so. So there are SPUDs and PUDs all over the community. There's one down the street where the Slosky's is at.
Where, what, I'm sorry?
At Slosky's, that's governed by two different, there's apartments and there's also a restaurant there. So I can go through a small list of them if you'd like.
Okay.
There's one just down the street.
Well, I took the time today to look up every single SPUD on the zoning map of Midwest City and to look at the data detail, and I found 0 SPUDs that listed a more than one underlying zoning classification.
Okay.
And that agrees with what I have told you, is that this is not permitted according to Midwest City ordinances. You're just asking for legal repercussions, if you ask me. And as I told you before, I'm not going to be too happy whenever the city has spending my tax money to defend this because a citizens group decides they want to fight it. And, you know, I've looked into dealing with it myself and called around to the state attorney general's office because I thought they might have a hand in it. But as it turns out, they would be defending you. So private legal representation is what would be required for us to tackle this if in fact it passes. And I feel that's exactly what should happen. I mean, I find it very problematic that I can read this ordinance to you. It seems very clear cut to me. Excuse me. And passing the SPUD, it's not, I just don't like the characterization of it being something that is of minimal concern. I only found out just the other day that the division of the 2 lots that were gifted to Mr. Johnson for development required a SPUD to split those lots. That was done
I've
just...
got to say, I'd not disagree with a lot of what you said, but gifted when we sent out a RFP for other people to bid on it, and there were 2 people that bid on it, and he was one of the 2 that bid on it. He actually was the one that won that. He wasn't gifted anything from the city.
Okay, well, I'm sorry for my terminology, but he did receive them at 0 cost, correct?
Are there any other builders building almost $200,000 homes in that neighborhood willing to take that risk? That's what he's doing.
Should there be those homes built there?
Yeah, there probably should be. And the city put that out for a bid. 2 people bid on it. There wasn't a gift there. The city puts things out for a bid a lot. I haven't taken an issue with very much of what you said, but I've taken a huge issue with that.
Okay. Well, let me go ahead
and wrap it up, Mr. Cochran. I'd appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I do have just a few more details since Mr. Reed brought that up, I would like to go ahead and address that just a little bit further. Those lots that were put out as a request for proposal, whenever the city took...
I do have to say something real quick. We are so far off right here.
No, sir, we're not.
These lots have nothing to do with the Bell project, and we need to bring it back to...
Thank you.
Let me make a quick...
yeah, let's wrap it up, Mr. Cochran. I appreciate it.
Guys, folks, this is not part of the discussion. This is not part of the public discussion.
I understand. He's fixing to wrap it up.
City Attorney, what do you think?
Go ahead, Mr. Cochran.
But even back in September, he wouldn't have been able to talk about these 7
houses. I don't use that very often, but when we started this, I asked everybody to be civil and maintain, and hollering from the gallery is not civil. Let's give this man a chance to finish up. Mr. Cochran, please wrap it up, and we've got other people that want to talk.
People come first, absolutely first, not money. You need to get over it.
Have a nice night, ma'am. Thank you, Mr. Cochran, for your patience. Please, could you go ahead and wrap up your
My point is that numerous provisions have been made to relax what is city code, parking regulations, fire, and to the point of the fire protection, I've never heard anything about 30 feet. It's always been 45 feet. I could be wrong about that. I haven't been able to keep up with this and track it all the time. But I know there has been some attrition in the people, because this has dragged on so long, the protest against it appears to be more minimal than what it used to be.
Well,
the Planning Commission, this place was packed.
I wouldn't agree with you on that, but go
ahead.
The
Planning Commission, this place was totally packed.
Yes, sir.
And I dare say there were a few more the last time I was here. But what I'm saying is that the city has made a great number of provisions for Mr. Johnson in this. He received, I don't want to call it a gift,
well,
again, but whenever he took possession of those lots, he had proposed designs. Only one of them, to me, I've driven and looked at them, stood there looking at them, looked at the pictures of what he proposed. They don't appear to be.
I'm sorry, we are so far out of here. How the design of these houses are have nothing to do with the discussion that we're having.
Yeah,
no, sir,
Mr. Cochran, I'm going to have to agree with Mr. Reed.
Okay.
We're way off kilter here. So we're talking about the Bellum project and the issues with the Bellum project. I've given you a lot of latitude, so would you please just go ahead and wrap up your comments? And so we've got other people that want to speak.
Okay. I just want to say one thing, because you opened the door to this.
Yes, sir, I did.
To say that this spud is one certain step, then we need to go on down the road. On this other spud, whenever the agreement was accepted for him to build houses on and split these 2 lots, it was agreed it's in the paperwork that this is all the agreement. When those houses were proposed, he received
We're not talking about the houses, Mr. Cochran. We're talking about.
Okay, I'm talking about just the provisions that have been made for this one developer.
Well, there
A
hasn't been any
precedent has been
provisions
set
made
for
as a
dividing.
result of this. There hasn't been anything given for the Bellum project.
Okay.
This is a rezoning case, and that's all it is.
And
Nothing's been allowed.
I'm speaking about rezoning in that same vein.
Okay.
These spuds were allowed right in the middle of this neighborhood. Okay? If you look across the city map, you will find there are a very, very minimal number of spuds in the neighborhood. I can just about name them to you.
Okay, sir.
Okay? There's one up there in Midwest Industrial Park. There's the parking lot over at, and that Midwest Industrial Park abuts industry and commercial, okay? It's not in the middle of a neighborhood like we're asking to do here.
Okay.
The parking lot for the church, St. Philip Neri, that's a spud.
Yes, sir.
It's a parking lot for a church, okay? It's not an apartment complex and alcohol establishment and other commercial. So this is totally out of character with what the use of PUD and SPUD has been. You can look at them on the map, and you can see that they are not plunked down in the middle of neighborhoods.
Right.
And the revitalization plan and the sense of place for the original mile plan done in 2016 does not speak to this type of thing.
Thank you for your comments, Mr.
Okay.
Cochran. I appreciate it. There's
Yes,
other
sir.
people that do want to speak.
Okay, well,
Everything you've said has been taken into account. Thanks again for the interruption and your patience.
so this is it? You're just not going to let me speak anymore, is that correct?
No, sir, I'm trying to get everybody.
Okay.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
There's other people behind you that want to speak. Pardon me if I mispronounce your name. Ray Oplaka? I'm sorry? Opelka, I'm sorry.
It's not a problem. Ray's easier.
Okay, Ray. Please state your name and address for the record.
Ray Opelka, 336 Bab, Midwest City. First off, I'd like to ask everybody to take a breath.
Thank you.
Okay. And I'm going to be very short and concise. Okay?
You're a good man.
First off, thanks very much for hearing everybody what we've got to say. But I do have to just touch on a couple of things. One in particular that I do not believe that has really been discussed. I've brought this up in the past at prior meetings, but I want to touch on it again really quick, is the commercial aspect of what's going on here. This really hasn't even been touched on tonight, very lightly. Everybody's been focused on parking, which is very important, but there is no way, based on personal experience, 50-something years old, and been an entrepreneur, small businessman myself, and frequenting places like coffee shops or bars, normally those types of businesses do not self-sustain by just the people in the neighborhoods. They require outside people to come in to visit them. Now you're talking about having 30 units, 30 plus units upstairs, so people are going to be living in there. They're going to go, hey, I've got a great coffee shop downstairs. Why don't you come on over? Hey, friends, come on over. Hey, we got a beer place down here. You guys need to come in and check this out too. Nobody is discussing the parking that is going to increase and the traffic that is going to increase. That's not even been touched for those people coming in, period. You're all hung up on this 51, 53, or whatever the number is and everything else, but you're not even talking about the increased traffic that's going to be coming in to frequent these places.
I'm going to disagree with you on that point because I raised that point.
Yes, you did, as a matter of fact, ma'am. Thank you very much. I stand corrected. Also, you talked about the people, the employees that work there as well, okay? But it really needs to be addressed. My biggest concern is this, and Mr. Mayor, you brought that up about sidewalks going in. Until that happens, we're going to have the traffic coming through with the construction and everything else. My concern is the kids. And unless those sidewalks get put in, and until those sidewalks get put in, okay? And this is another thing that I brought up in one of the other meetings as well. I mean, everybody's in the street, okay? And if locals do come to the bar, now you have drunks walking down the street at 2 a.m. So I'm just simply saying. And I do have to agree with the gentleman that was up here just a minute before, where when he made the comment, it's like we have to buy this in order to find out what's in it. There are so many questions that every single one of you predominantly has brought up that you don't have answers for, and yet you're going to vote on this?
But we do this every single time we have a spud that comes before us without.
Not of this magnitude, sir.
But we do this. We say yes, the spud can, and then they come back to us. So this is something that we say, yeah, a spud, but now we have to see the plant.
Let me interject here just really quickly. I apologize, sir, but in fairness, let me interject on your point. One of the things also that Mr. Harless was addressing earlier about a spud, and that's unique about a spud, is you have certain creativity with it, and you also have the ability to put restrictions on it. So one of the concerns that you raised that hasn't really been talked about, in fairness, the commercial use, and what particular commercial uses would be had. And there's been previous issues raised about whether it would be a wine bar or a establishment that would serve alcohol in some way. And to raise your point about people who are intoxicated walking the streets at 2 o'clock in the morning. With a spud, Billy, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is the ability to request a restriction as to what types of commercial use are allowed in the spud, correct?
Yes, there are some restrictions you can put on it as far as uses. The applicant has put in what he's requesting those uses to be, and to fall into those uses. If you want to put some time limits on that, you'd have to talk with the applicant to see if he's acceptable to that, or why he is asking for the hours or whatever he's asking for. But yes, he's put those in there, those uses.
But the reality of it is that the city could put limitations. The limitations, for example, yes, I'm just throwing something out here, could indicate no alcohol to be served on the property in the commercial space, no dispensary to be placed on the property, for example. These are things that could be put in place if the spud were to be put into place. It's not part of the current proposal, but it is something that the city could address, just in furtherance of your comments.
Very good. I'll stand down. It's just the point that I wanted to, the main thing I wanted to bring up was the increased traffic that would have to be, that would increase the amount of patronage to those, which really, to be honest with you, it hasn't, although you brought it up, ma'am, really hasn't been addressed overall. And I think that will increase and make a big difference in the area, and not necessarily to the betterment of the area. So thanks for your time.
Well, I just want to tell you this, sir. Regardless of this project or not, we were going to put sidewalks on, what's that, Kitty
Hawk and that?
Kitty Hawk, we were going to put sidewalks there, so.
Thank you very much,
I want to let you all know that, regardless.
The sidewalks needed to be in the drainage, so thank you.
We want the children to be safe. Thank you. Kitty Hawk, I got you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen. First off, I want to take just a second to congratulate Mr. Reed and Mr. Burns for their re-election to their council seat. Now, Mr. Deckett, you're on base. I am going to ask indulgence for the rest of the speakers to try to shorten it up just a little bit so we can get staff and everybody out of here.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. Thank you for your many, many years of service to us.
Yes, sir.
The citizens of Midwest City. May I respectfully
I'm sorry, Mr. Brick. Could you, I almost forgot, could you state your name and address for the record?
Oh, Rick Deckett, 208 Atkinson Drive. May I respectfully ask by a show of hands, how many of you live in the original mile? I know she does.
You know the answer to that because we serve different wards.
Okay.
Does I have count, Rick?
Does I have count?
Several times, but not currently.
How about you in the audience? Show of hands, how many are from the original mile?
And how many are protesting this?
These are the ones that are qualified to say what parking and traffic is like in the area that is proposed to be rezoned. They know the traffic congestion, the parking issues, they live with it every day, including church services and football games, which are a normal part of our lives. They are the ones whose quality of life will be negatively impacted because the area of town proposed for rezoning for this project is not equipped to handle such traffic, nor the stress on aged water and sewer systems. This area was designed for single-family homes. The apartment complex should be located next to what is already existing major hubs, such as the vacant lots on Key and Wilson or the Clock Tower area. Midwest City would still get the revenue benefits and the original mile enhancement that it's looking for, while the quality of life for those living in the original mile would be preserved. Please listen to your constituents who have asked you to be their voices on these issues and to vote no on the rezoning of the lots on Kitty Hawk and Jacobs. Thank you.
Thank you.
You want to take over the meeting?
Jared Jenks. Make sure you state your name and address, please.
My name is Jared Jenks, 507 East Grumman Drive. I've been a resident of Midwest City for 2 years, and I've owned real estate in Midwest City for about 8 years. I am a professional real estate investor, and I've minored in real estate at the University of Central Oklahoma, where I've studied trends towards mixed-use projects and mixed-use real estate. I understand and empathize with the pushback on this project. There have been very legitimate concerns that have been addressed over the course of the project. In some cases, these concerns have been addressed exceeding what is the minimum requirements. This project is new, it's foreign, and not what Midwest City has ever known. And I know we have the small one in Midwest City on Air Depot. That's an exception. That was a taste of what mixed use can be. It's very small. I will say that I understand the history of Midwest City, and what I understand the history of Midwest City. It was proudly championed as the model city back in 1940. I've seen it on billboards numerous times, and that's great. I understand that this is the model city, America's model city. Kind of what I understand it to be was a progressive way to envision living and urban life that was completely new to what was before 1940. You guys don't need a history lesson. Everyone's here. Everybody knows the history of Midwest City and is very proud of it. Is that agreeable? Is that agreeable? I'm proud of the roots. I understand them. I'm proud to be a resident of Midwest City. And I'm optimistic about the future. I think it's a good thing that the residents are coming here because they're all passionate about this matter. They're all passionate about the city in which they live. I care. My heart's been racing for about 2 hours now because I'm coming up here in support of this project. I see this as an incredible opportunity in the original mile of Midwest City. I see this as an incredible opportunity to Midwest City. Mixed use is where real estate is headed. It's created buzz and interest in places that have adopted it, like Edmond on Broadway. I want to be clear, we are not Edmond. I understand that. I understand we're not Edmond. We don't want to be. We want to be Midwest City. At least I think. I think we want to be different. I support this project for a number of reasons. I think it's progressive. I see this as a way to encourage existing landlords in the neighborhood to increase the quality of the rentals to demand more. If you have one-bed, one-bath apartment complexes that demand $900 a month per unit, and the smallest two-bed, one-bath houses in the neighborhood demand $750, there's some variances in there, landlords are going to want to bridge that gap. And to do that, in my opinion, they're going to need to increase the quality of their rentals. The rental demand will be more, home values will increase, the overall quality of the neighborhood will increase, thereby making that original mile that much more attractive. I don't think anyone will complain about that. I certainly won't. I want to be clear, I'm not suggesting that we forget about the history of Midwest City, quite the contrary, specifically in this original mile. I'm saying that I think we need to progress and not stagnate. We need to remember and be proud of our history and tell everyone about it, because I think it's great. I simply think that we need to create more history. And I think this mixed-use project is the next step. 1940s real estate and 2020s real estate is completely different, but in some ways I think it could be the same. Creating that buzz around what Midwest City is doing, much like it did in the 40s. I realize this is just developing 7 lots and not developing an entire city. However, I'm thinking bigger picture, and by making Midwest City more attractive, by adopting these progressive real estate ideas, being open-minded to them, maybe this will snowball into other areas of Midwest City and attract more residents. I think that's probably the goal of every municipality, is to attract more residents. And I'll leave with this. I understand that the developer has the right to do whatever he wants to do with these lots within the bounds of the existing zoning. If this project is rejected, the lots will be sold to another developer that intends to put individual rental homes on these individual lots. That was confirmed in the last of the 3 meetings that we've already had, which I attended. Nothing can be done about this because the new owner will be abiding by the existing zoning laws. Also, Mr. Johnson can sell to whoever he wants to. 7 rental properties. I mean, how boring. How boring. How boring. It's one or the other, and I see this decision as easy. It's a progressive mixed-use apartment complex or 7 rental houses. I wouldn't be speaking up here if I didn't this passionately if I didn't think that this was important. And I also wouldn't be up here speaking passionately if this was anything other than a mixed-use project. I think it's interesting. Create community, create walkability, create buzz, and don't be boring. Because Midwest City is not boring. I don't think so. I don't think Midwest City is boring at all. That's all I got.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you.
Ms. Morrell.
Mr. Mayor, I want to make a statement. You know,
Yes, sir.
we've all tried to let everybody talk, and we're trying to give everybody their opportunity to speak. Whether you're for it or against it, I would hope that you would give the person that's talking at that microphone the respect to keep the comments to yourself in the back. Let them talk and let them speak without having to worry about what's being said behind their back.
Molly Morrell, 313 East Kitty Hawk Drive. I live down the street where Mr. Johnson wants to build his apartments. You know, this man is an investor. I own that old house. I've lived there over 30 years.
Yes, ma'am.
I've got rent houses around me. My daughter told me today I was the street punk, because I go up and down the street and pick up the trash. Didn't really make me real happy. I also roll their trash cans to their yards because they're too lazy to get out there and do it. No, I don't like investors. It's a fact. Because you put work on me and you brought the neighborhood down by buying it up to put in all your rentals, tore down all the apartments out of Dale City, brought all that trash in. I read today we have a higher murder rate here than anywhere.
No, ma'am, we don't.
Well, statistics and what I read on Google say that's not true.
That's not true. That's the only thing I'll argue with you on.
So I'm going what I read on Google.
Okay.
And I look at all this and I think about the children walking up and down the street. I think about bars. I think about how that Baptist church, they don't care because they say they want to evangelize people. But here's a little fact. When the other church was bought out in the neighborhood, I know it had $1 million price tag. And they went up there and sat in the mall for many years till they built a church because they don't get fair market value. They get replacement value. And building sidewalks, well, I've waited 30 years. I took my granddaughter to the park down there by the school the other day. It's so deep under the swings, I couldn't run backwards and forth and swing her. Went to the other park, water that deep down underneath it. Went to the other park, same thing.
Ms. Morrell,
I really don't. I want the old square mile to be family friendly.
Okay.
And apartments do not work for me. They don't.
All right.
And my yard's not a trash pile either.
No, it's not.
And I am not low class.
No, ma'am.
I would just like for you to think on that a minute. Where you live, do you want it down your street? Would you like your mom and dad to live with it? Because trust me, that's what I've done for 30 years out here. I've taken care of a lot of elderly people. People I won't even say their name. I'm really not supposed to. And no one I've ever taken care of me liked any apartments built around them. It brought their neighborhood and their lifestyle down. I guess that's all I have to say.
Thank you,
You'll
Ms.
do
Morrell.
what you want.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Meissner.
Ronald Masoner, 224 East Kitty Hawk Drive. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for your patience and listening. Secondly, I wasn't planning on saying this, but this came up in a town hall meeting a couple of times, back I think on the 9th of January. Out of respect to you, Mr. Byrne, and respect to you, Mr. Reed, to ask these people to respect and not interrupt when somebody's up here talking, that goes for every one of y'all too. And Mr. Reed disrespected the guy a couple of speakers ago.
So I do have the right to interject because I am a councilman.
See, here you go again.
You're right, 100%.
And you do present yourself as a little bit of a hothead. But what I want to get back to.
Hello, meet kettle, we're both black.
I want to.
Go ahead, Ron.
I've lived there 39 years in that house. Y'all would have got to know me a lot sooner if I'd have had any imagination that this man was going to put two houses on a single lot. Now, somebody said, well, that doesn't have anything to do with the Bellum. Well, it does, because he's the same man that wants to put the Bellum up.
Okay.
Okay? When this meeting first started, y'all spent 30, 45 minutes talking about infrastructure, basically. Drainage and sidewalks and curbs. This city is ill-prepared for this project. From what I've heard and understand, common sense. I don't have college education like some people seem to want to throw out there. But I do have 60 years on this earth and common sense that tells me this city is several years away from having an infrastructure that's ready for this kind of development in the original mile. Plus the original mile, also any of those apartments that are already there, they were on the outer parts of off the main thoroughfares, not in the central part of it. A lot has been going on about the vision Mr. Atkinson had. If Mr. Atkinson had wanted apartments in those 7 lots, he would have made it spud zone from the beginning. Okay, with that being said, I understand there's been some work done. The pipe bursting that was mentioned earlier. I live at 224 East Kitty Hawk. Last fall, I had a sewer blockage. I tried to do it myself, couldn't get it done, called a plumber out. They found absolutely nothing, but they hit a blockage right where, footage-wise estimated, is where my sewer line would tie into the main. I don't know what that pipe bursting does. I don't know if it can shift, but about 2 years before that, Miss Eads had to have her sewer redone. When her plumber dug that sewer up back there to tie it into the main, he said it was not tied in properly by the people that did the pipe bursting. I imagine that's going to be a systemic thing throughout there, because I've had an issue with it. When he pulled his plug back out, there was nothing on there. There was no roots, and I knew he wasn't going to find roots because my sewer was replaced 30 years ago. It is 4-inch Schedule 40 PVC pipe all the way out to the main. So I do think there's many, many years to go before this city is ready to do that. And first base is not him submitting his plans. First base is this committee voting whether to approve it or not. You can nip this in the bud real quick, and that's by voting no. And what I can see and everything I've heard tonight and in meetings previous, that would be the honest, respectable thing to do for this community, for your citizens, and for this panel. I mean, I really don't know what else to say. I think the city has expanded. I think Mayor Dukes is the one that made the comment in the town hall meeting last 21st that the city was landlocked.
We are.
You're not ready to do this project infrastructure-wise where it's being proposed. And being landlocked is not a reason to just throw it up there and say, hey, we're going to do it. That's not a good enough reason. For one reason, the city for years has neglected the original mile in order to expand and build out. And I have no doubts about that. Infrastructure has been neglected. There's been a lot of talk about change. People don't like change. I like change. I personally, I've seen some of the houses Mr. Johnson is building over there. Yeah, they look different than what's there, but they're single houses, single family houses, and I don't have a problem with the way they look. Yeah, the roofs look a little different. They don't match up, and they don't, you know. So what? I don't care about that. But the two projects currently on Kitty Hawk, that is, I made a request to every one of y'all at one of the meetings, town hall meetings, that y'all go by there and look at that and really look at it honestly and objectively and tell me that you really believe that was the right thing for y'all to do. And this apartment complex is far worse than what's on those two lots. And safety issue wise, that roof line on the back house at 220 East Kitty Hawk is only like 3 to 4 feet at the most from the power lines. They are at the same level. A person could almost reach off of that roof and touch those power lines. Or if a roofer was up there and slipped and fell, he could fall and electrocute himself. And y'all approved that. I personally, I think that's a disgrace, and shame on every one of you that voted to allow that to happen, and shame on every one of you if you allow this to pass and him to even be able to submit a plan. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
What house are you talking about? Is it the two houses?
It's the two houses. No, it's the two houses at what would be 220 East Kitty Hawk. No.
No, that's the one just a few houses down from Susan.
No, I live right next door to Miss Eads, and I'm 2 houses down from where this two houses are.
And I agree. I drive where they're a lot. If Jeff can sell those, I'm more power to him. I thought it was very strange to see 2 houses there.
But if you walk up in between them and look at them and see the shared drive and how they got to turn into those garages, it doesn't matter which project, either the one down by Rosefield or this one. There's no way other than a compact car. If somebody's got a full-size or mid-size vehicle, they're going to be hard-pressed to turn into those garages. In one shot, definitely. So, anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's take about a 5-minute recess.
Taking a giant leap here, but I'm missing.
Got a small
Because I
bladder.
don't see
Oh, thank you. Thought they were gonna have to call it for a dinner break. Have it catered. Appreciate it.
It's kind of rough up there, Pastor.
Yeah, you know, I only have about maybe 2 or 3 more meetings. But I'm kind of going to miss it in a way, but for the most part.
Where you spend all your time here now? Not at the park,
You know, my mom passed away right around Christmas, and so I've kind of been, I got in the habit of staying around here, you know, with her, and then I got both my houses leased out. Pretty, you know, not permanent, but over the next several months. So I've just been staying here.
Florida?
Mm-hmm.
California for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Have a tough life.
What's that?
Yeah, tough life there, man.
Yeah, I work, which I wouldn't call it work, but the ones out in California, I bought and sold 4 different houses out there. But it was a lot of fun. Got watching the waves roll in, staying in the deck, stop, drink a beer, you know, go in and paint a little bit, redecorate the house.
So 4 houses and pay cash for another house?
You know, the first one I did in California, I am not kidding, and I'm not bragging, but I made more on that one house, and I didn't have it but about 18 months, and all I did was repainted it and staged it, and I made more on that one house than I have in any development I've ever done, probably including Forest Land, and that I've worked on that for almost 30 years. 29th in Hiawassee. But I've been working on that since 1995. But I could add up every dime I made on it for all that time, and I made more on that one single house in California. All right. Thanks for the candy.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'll go ahead and call us back to order so we can move on.
Hey, it wasn't far off, was I?
But
Do what?
Ms. Burns, the floor is yours.
Yep.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor. I want to raise an objection.
Well, I've never been objected. I don't know whether to sustain or overrule, but go ahead.
Well, I just read in the code or somewhere on the city's website about raising an objection, and when it needs to be done, you just need to do it immediately, you know, at the time, and you could overrule it. But I'm objecting to having been cut off earlier. I endured numerous interruptions, and it kind of threw me off. It's very hard for somebody like me or any of these other people to come up here and stand before this body and speak, and they get a little bit shook up. You know, I guess if I did it all the time, I'd be a little more skilled at it. But I had a few more points that I did not get to make.
Well,
and I'm asking for about 5 minutes.
I'm
asking for about 5 minutes to
I'm going to have
address
to cut
that.
it off for time's sake, sir. I apologize.
You will not do that? Okay, I'd like for the record to show then that I objected to the way that I was cut off from my speaking time.
Yes, sir.
And just have that recorded as part of the proceedings.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I think I am really struggling with this, and I have no clue. I really have no clue how this is going to end up tonight. But I think everybody here tonight can agree on one thing in this the people that have taken the brunt of this are the city staff, and that's Tim Lyons and his staff, Vaughn Sullivan, Brandon Claves and his officers, Mike Stroh and his staff, Billy Harless and his staff, Heather Poole and the city IT personnel. They have taken a beating on this, and it's hard to sit back and watch and listen to it because these people can't defend themselves. And I just hope, and I truly do not know how this is going to end up, but I just hope that however this ends up tonight, that everybody in this room realizes that everybody on this horseshoe up here, and we know that everybody out there cares about Midwest City, and nobody wants to do anything to harm it. Everybody wants to move forward, and I just hope that, like I said, no matter how this turns out, that we can put this behind us and start to rebuild some trust in the city between the citizens and the staff, the citizens and us, and vice versa.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. With that being said, the chair would entertain a motion.
I do think that we should probably see if the developer has anything to say. When I walked by him, he said he's got one small thing and he's got a right to speak.
With that being said, Mr. Johnson, approach the podium, please. Yeah, I've changed roles. I'm a judge now.
Jeff Johnson, 5 Northeast 3rd. Very simply, I'll just read a small statement and then we can move forward. There's been many questions asked and answered about Bellum. We have listened to concerns and have addressed many of those as possible. Largest concern being parking. We've tried to do our best with that. I am firm in my belief that the Bellum project is the highest and best use for the land. Not only is the project responsible use of the land, but it also fills a housing need. It will be most significant investment in the mile since town center. Changing the culture in how we think about the original mile is vital to the success, to its success and the city's success. We need to think of this as an urban area in a suburb city. It is important for all cities to have a defined downtown and urban core. The mile is this in our city. Midwest City has very little open land left. It is vital that the city learn how to redevelop older areas in the city. I understand this is new and different way of thinking, but I feel the Bellum project is a perfect fit for the original mile. It could be the start of many new ideas and things to come for the mile. Or if not supported, could be the opposite. A yes vote for the project is a vote for progress and change in the original mile. Thank you for your consideration of the project.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Johnson, before you walk off, is there anything that was asked of us tonight, or we responded, that you would want to clarify to any of these people out here?
Oh, wow. You know, what was said, many of the smaller issues is, you know, you put something on print and it gets taken, I mean, literal that minute. This is a vision and an idea of what this could look like. And if, you know, if there's you know, with the fire department, if there's something I need to move 2 feet, I'll move it 2 feet. And all these things, you know, can happen in that process. But it was almost impossible for me to get it right the very first time. I mean, you know, I got to meet with all these people and go through their concerns and address those. But, you know, safety standards, all those type things, I understand that. You know, the parking kept being referred to as on-street parking. It is off-street parking. It is not in the street. I think a couple of you tried to clarify that. I just think it's a positive way forward and a direction that the original mile can learn how to be the urban core that it was really intended to be when it was developed. And it's not a suburban community. It's not a suburban neighborhood. It should never even be treated like one. So it's the city's prize, and the city needs to really embrace what the original mile is. And I think things like this can really propel that forward. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
I've got one, Jeff.
Yes, sir.
Can you shed a little bit more light on the 2 buildings you're proposing for the retail, the 2 building Bs, what you're doing on the ground floor, or what?
Yeah, there's 670 feet each is kind of what they are, which is equivalent, or roughly equivalent to one of the apartment sizes.
But the footprint, I'm sorry, the footprint's how big of the first floor?
The footprint is twice that big. So there's a unit, a residential unit behind it, and then a small retail in the front. And, you know, one of them may be a leasing office, one of them could be a coffee shop. I mean, we just wanted to leave it open to, the community will embrace what's there. If we put a coffee shop in there and nobody comes for coffee, then it won't be a coffee shop anymore. It may be an office space, or it could be an insurance agent, or it could be that the neighborhood will decide what it is. The market will decide. It's not for us to sit here and think we're going to know 100% what the market is for that space. We may go through a couple things until we get it right or till something is successful. It's new, it's innovative, it's different for the mile, but it's urban, and it's what other communities like Norman, like Edmond, all the other cities are creating an urban downtown area, and that's what drives and keeps people in your city is unique developments like that. And we want people living here. That's the biggest objective, is to get people to want to live here and keep them here, especially younger gentlemen, like the gentleman that spoke in favor of it. He's the target, not us. I mean, we're not the target. He's the target. He's the guy you want to keep in your city.
But the problem with making the statement that he is not the target, there's a perception there that the target is to move the people that live there out.
No, sir, not at all.
I mean, I guarantee you that's part of their thought process.
I think you'll lose a lot of the rentals over the time as things progress. Yes, I think some of those people may move.
And I understand the concept, because I was a police officer in Oklahoma City, and I rode around 16th in Indiana. I grew up as a police officer over there, and I knew what it was like back in the early 80s. I also worked at 800 North High, and we used to make countless, we would make drug arrests every day in that area, and it's been revitalized. But the issue, and I've struggled with, and I'm still struggling with this, is that we're being asked, and this is new to me too, we're being asked to make a decision on a plan that we don't know what the plan is. And that's the struggle for me, because just like what you just said, we're going to try a coffee shop. If that doesn't work, we'll try an insurance agent. If that doesn't work, we'll try something else. Well, and I understand the concept, but the concept to these people is that you're just going to roll the dice and roll the dice and roll the dice, and you've got to convince them. And I understand that this is step one. That if this passes, you probably will face more scrutiny than you've ever faced before, because if this passes, we're putting our reputation on the line. Hold up, because you're asking us to take you at your word right now on a plan that doesn't exist. And it's our reputations up here. If we roll the dice and give you an opportunity to work with city staff to come up with a plan that is not in place, then, and it fails, it's our reputation, and then we have to deal with the fallout from these people here. And I really don't want to do, I would love to see this work, but it's scary because we haven't seen, people are visual, and there's nothing visual.
Let me go back to, so your plan is on the 2Bs is half of it to be commercial, and it wouldn't change. You don't plan on changing where you're trying to make the whole footprint commercial later?
No.
Your plan is to keep...
It would only be the 670 feet each. So it'd be the bottom front of the two far east buildings.
And I know, Pat's saying all that would be spelled out in the PUD, but part of, what he's saying, the more I think we could, kind of pin you down, and I think you want to be pinned down. You don't want to be 6 months down the road and find out that...
I mean, my vision is for one of them for sure to be a coffee shop. Like I said, I've talked to Underground, they have interest, and and I'll do whatever I can as a developer to make sure that they give it a shot. I may have to build the whole coffee shop for them, but I'll do that. It's not uncommon to have to invest TI dollars to get the tenant that you want. So I'm willing to do that.
And then one of the other comments that I've heard is the VRBO. You wouldn't have a problem saying that in this PUD that there could not be any VRBO rentals.
You mean like an Airbnb?
Like short-term rentals.
I don't know. I haven't even thought about that. So I would say.
What would be short term?
I don't know. You first the person that's brought that up to me. I would probably not want to limit it, but because as a real estate owner, you hate limitations, but it's definitely not in my plans to be, you know, a hotel, you know, so.
But I guess,
You go ahead,
I guess, Mr. Johnson, when it comes down to it, though, here's been my consistent problem. You and I have met, you have been gracious enough to bring this plan forward, and I think that everybody up on this horseshoe can safely say that they're desirous to see investment in Midwest City. The problem that I have consistently is there's a lot of ask from my constituents, from my neighbors, from my friends with regard to this project. One of the big asks is just the construction of the project in and of itself, which Mr. Byrne touched on at one of the last town hall meetings, but we haven't talked about tonight. Trying to get construction vehicles through there. What's been happening with Rose Field right now, can concrete trucks block in the streets because they're trying to pour concrete? Because there is no space. I mean, there is no space to get in that. And those are problems that we haven't even gotten to talk about here tonight. But one of the things that I have a consistent problem with is you have a lot of asks of the city to bring this development in, but you don't have a lot of give with it in terms of you want to ask for these things to be different than what the norm may be or what has usually been experienced there. But in terms of like what you were just saying in response to Councilman Moore's question, you know, as a landowner, you don't want to be restricted with those things. You know, you don't want to say, no, there won't be any short-term rentals or vacation rentals by owner type of thing, VRBO. Councilman Price, Allen, just for VRBO. You know, that's one of the problems here. And in the meanwhile, you know, we are faced with an issue where it's a could versus should kind of situation in my mind. You know, I like to draw a lot of analogies, and could versus should is what I keep thinking of with regard to this project. You know, could we approve this rezoning? Could it happen? Yes, it could. Should we do it? That's the bigger question. And for me, you know, historically, this council has given great deference to whoever's ward is going to be most affected by this and to their constituents. And it has been very moving to see so many people turn out and give up their time to be able to speak their opinions on this project, whether for or against. But we're in a situation here where, you know, we are trying to determine what should happen with this parcel of land. And we've talked a lot about where the intent started with this project. The intent right now that's clear is it's not zoned for SPUD. It's zoned essentially for low-density residential. And to change it to SPUD is going to require a different impact than what has been felt in Midwest City, and I think you can agree with that sentiment, okay? You talk about an urban core, and the packet that was prepared for us and posted on the website talks about other areas where this type of development has occurred. But what we have right now is we have a core residential neighborhood, and we have property owners, and I have looked at the list surrounding the proposed project, and living there, I know a lot of these people, and they're my friends and my neighbors. And they have lived there, on average, in excess of 20 years. Many people have lived there 40 years. Many people have lived there 60 years. I mean, this is not a short-term residential area. Yes, there are rentals there. Yes, I think you own some of them. There are other investors who own some of them, you know? One of the things that I got excited with this project about the original mile reinvestment is the idea that we were going to increase home ownership. That was our goal. We wanted long-term residents. We wanted to re-increase that because so much of the area had went to rental property. This project doesn't do that. And so in terms of adding to ownership, we don't get that from this project. The converse is, as you alluded to at the last town hall, if you sell it, you know, you have the right to sell it to who you choose. You know, you seem to have chosen that if you don't get your way to do this project as you've proposed, you're going to sell the property to another investor who's going to build rental property there. I mean, so that in turn is going to give us, yet again, more rentals. But it won't be 34. It'll be 7, based on the earlier conversation. You know, could we versus should we is where we're at this point. And so
I think it's exactly where you're at. You are deciding the direction of the original mile. And we've been working on the direction of the original mile for 10 years with the investment Committee. I was on the original steering team to decide what to do with the mile back in '07. And going down the same path and keeping things the same is not going to fix the original mile. If you don't get out of the box, and if you don't think differently, and if you don't think about what the future wants and or what people want in the future and what's going to keep people living in your city and creating cool and interesting environments for these people to be, then the mile will stay what it is now. And you can keep pouring infrastructure money in it and keep pouring infrastructure money in it, but if you don't change the direction of the mile, it's going to stay what it is now. The few houses we've built in there, yeah, that'll help. It's already helped. Property values have went up. But significant investments and interesting things like this is what truly will drive. And there's many other pieces of land in the mile that have possibilities for similar type, developments. Maybe they're different. Maybe, I don't know what they'll be because I don't own those lands. But all those people are watching and they're thinking right now, the direction that this goes is going to determine what they do with their land. And they're not going to go through what I've went through. 6 months of this, they're not going to do it. They're just sitting here watching to see what's going to happen tonight. Then they'll decide what they're going to do.
And my concern is, though, that they are watching what's going to happen tonight. And if we turn over the keys and give all of these concessions to you, every other developer who walks through that door is very well going to expect the same from us.
You should pray,
and I think that is a real problem. I think it is a real problem for our city.
So, Ms. City Attorney, I have a question. I have a question for you, Ms. Poole. Let's say we pass this tonight, and we put some really strict guidelines or rules or whatever it's called on this development, and it goes 3 or 4 months from now, and because I've never done this, and we go in there that we say he has to meet X, Y, and Z. The parking, the height restrictions that the fire department's talked about, the deal the gentleman brought up about the dumpster, the whole litany of things that are different than what is the norm. Where do we stand as a council? Can we shut it down? Because I can remember a conversation one time that I think I remember that I was told that once the ball starts rolling on it, it's hard to stop it from rolling. And I want this to happen. I think the development itself would spur more development in Midwest City, but I also don't want to be put in a position where 3 or 4 months from now we find out that, well, we really can't get that much parking on the inside, or we really can't get that fire truck in there, or we really can't do this because we don't have the space. And if we do, what recourse do we have to stop it?
Well, if we put restrictions on it and he comes in with the platting and the plan and presents it to the Community Development Department and it doesn't meet the criteria, then he doesn't get the permits to move forward with the construction. The concern that Mr. Harless raised is that putting restrictions on at this point in the development limits what flexibility the developer has, and that he's still at the stage of trying to determine what would fit within that zoning. All we're doing tonight is determining what the appropriate zoning for this development would be. Is that correct, Mr. Harless? Because really, this has gone through.
Well, the SPUD's putting limitations on me now. It's written, it has to fit within those things. And the site plan is, subject to change based on fire and all those people that have to go through that during the permitting process.
So in other words, he's indicating that should the building be at a height that requires the 26, then he's going to have to make it 26. If the layout requires the trash be moved, then when he goes in to get the permits for the building, he either meets those requirements or he does not, and then he doesn't get the permits to move forward.
Yes, you're not approving a site plan, you're approving the zoning and the language of the SPUD.
So I've got a couple of comments.
We've been over
One
this.
about Pat's comment about we don't really know what's going to happen. And any time when a SPUD comes to us, we've never once had plans. We've never had anything that was permanent. Does this fit a SPUD? Yes or no? Then it's their job to bring the stuff back to us. So every SPUD we've ever voted on has been basically, and I'm not diminishing your all's folks out here, it's basically been like this, in that here's a plan, here's an idea, here's a drawing. Can I qualify for a SPUD? Yes or no? Yes. Then I will actually do the real engineering and everything and I'll build this. The second thing, to some of the comments, to this young man's comments up here. I'm 48 years old. I am not the future of this city. I'm not the future of this state. I'm not the future of this country, nor are the vast majority of us in here. That time has passed us by. We have to make sure that what we're doing to make this city viable is we draw young men like him in. We draw the millennials in. Because my spending patterns have gotten a lot less as I've gotten older because I don't have any needs. But we need these kids, these younger millennials that are going to come in here with pretty good income. 30+% of millennials have saved $100,000 by this point in their lives. They're in their 20s right now. They saved more than any generation before them because they were raised during the 2008 financial crisis. These guys aren't buying homes. They want experiences. They don't want big homes. The biggest thing that's getting ready to change economically is when the baby boomers pass away, their 2, 3, 4, 5,000 square foot homes are going to sit empty because people don't want them. They don't want to be tied to their homes. They want to be tied to a small outlay. They don't want to have to mow. The millennials want experiences. They want things that our generation didn't. The future's passed me by. I'm not it. But we need to make sure what we are doing is not only protecting the folks my age and above, but ensuring that this young man and other men like him are going to want to come in and rent. He didn't originally own a home in Midwest City. He bought property, but he liked Midwest City. We attracted him in. With that said, I'm going to make a motion that this passes with the requirements that we have for zoning, such as parking. He's got to stick to all the requirements that we've discussed.
I second.
With all due respect, I didn't see that we closed discussion, first of all.
He asked for a motion earlier, so it was still open.
I second.
I have a question. You know, Pat asked, can I speak?
Yeah.
Pat asked what repercussion, and I'm just trying to think through the process with what little experience I have on it. But let's say we do pass it, the zoning passes. Yes, he still has to conform. Now, does this property have zoning? Could this property be sold to the next guy to where it's not Jeff's? You know, so does a SPUD, could that pass to the next person? Is it like straight zoning? Is it SPUD run with the land now?
I mean, they expire 6 months after approval if nothing's happened on them, but if he's built on it,
Okay, so it does expire in 6 months.
if nothing's happened.
You know, we changed that a few years ago because we had some spuds that had been sitting around for 20 or 30 years and nobody done anything. We had to go back and stick with 80s and early 90s rules, so we did change that spud
But
after a while.
I don't think there's any question that we have the ability to set higher restrictions than what is being discussed in the SPUD proposal. And we are essentially, by your motion and your seconding of the motion.
Yes, ma'am.
You are choosing to ignore all these constituents here who have come out time and time again to speak on this issue, and you are choosing to set no further restrictions. Let me speak, please, with all due respect.
I will.
You are choosing to set no more than minimum requirements with regard to this project. And without a full understanding, even as we sit here today, with regard to the location of this project, other than the schematics that have been seen.
As,
Never done that
Okay.
in any other spud
as it has been.
I do need to make a point of order. We do have a motion and we do have a second. Now, Ms. Eads, would you like to ask Mr. Reed to amend his motion to include restrictions?
Absolutely.
There is already restrictions.
Okay.
Let's listen. what restrictions would you like added? Because we do have the parking, we do have the fact that the building goes higher, he's gonna have a different fire lane. So what restrictions would you like to have added?
The parking is with regard to 51 spaces is what Billy quoted, okay? When you look at that design, which hasn't been raised yet also, that includes 2 handicap spots and 1 van accessible handicap spot, okay? Which is not even a tenth of the units that are in that project, not including anything with regard to commercial space either, type of thing. So I don't think the 51 parking spots is appropriate in and of itself. Also, if you look at the fact that if that's correct, and if what he's discussed is it's going to be 3 stories, it's going to exceed 30 feet, that there will have to be an adjustment in the fire lane to be 26 feet per the fire marshal's report. That's also going to affect the number of parking spots that are there. I don't think that setting the minimum at 51 parking spaces is appropriate. We're not doing anything to require any type of detention or retention. We're not doing anything to require.
We don't require that, Susan. We don't ever require that on somebody on the spud when they
but
first
we
come
can.
Up. That detention, no, I don't think we should. We never have. And I don't think that we should say that we're going to make it more difficult for anybody than we do everybody else. We've never done that when the spuds.
Have we ever stuck an apartment complex in the middle of a residential neighborhood?
No.
Then we're not comparing apples to apples. We're comparing apples to oranges.
I get what you're saying, and I do take offense to, I have listened for months. I had to take into account not only what everybody out here says, but the phone calls that I've received have run about 50-50 for it and against it. This is people that, for the most part, don't live in the original square mile, but I've gotten a lot of phone calls from people who have. Some who are for it, some who are against it. Some who have said they're afraid to speak up because the passions got so high, they didn't want to be targeted. And I don't know what targeted means because no one's going to beat up anybody for a vote or for them speaking up.
And
so I thought that was a little bit over the top. With that said, the restrictions will happen when he brings the plans and we have to vote on the final plans. That's when those restrictions come. I don't think that we should treat, and we have actually, by stretching this out for 6 months, we've already put restrictions in long-term costs to him that we've never done to anybody else.
Sean, would you agree though, and I'm not going to get into the detention and the drainage because that's been already identified in the report that he's going to have to meet the engineer's request. But I don't think it would be unreasonable, since he hasn't identified what type of businesses are going to go in, that we make sure that we put something in there that the parking is meets not only the minimum standards for the apartments, but it also meets the minimum standards for whatever business.
So how about if I amended it to say that the parking would have to conform with the mixed use as it sits? Or as the plan comes to us.
But what's that equal, Billy?
Based off the statute or the codes or whatever, or the ordinance.
He's proposed 51 parking places, and so, you know, we're all over the place on the parking. So I'm not sure I understand the question.
So mixed use, including commercial, what would that mean?
So that it wouldn't even be mixed.
51 plus what? For commercial.
You know what that is?
I calculated it out about 4.
For commercial uses, it's 1 to 200 for office uses, and it's 1 to 100 for eating establishments. So those 3 different uses that are all.
So was that 1 to 100? Is that 1 per 100 square feet?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you repeat that, Kelly? 1 to.
Commercial is 1 to 150. Restaurant is 1 to 100. And office is 1 to 250, I'm sorry.
And you all will not see this as a building permit. It won't come back to you. If this is passed, he'll have the zoning, and he would be able to go forward, so it will not come back.
I will amend it to say that the parking would have to conform with the mixed-use development standards that are set forth. I think that's the best.
And that would be 51, whatever the commercial requirements are.
51 plus.
51 including or 51 plus?
51 plus whatever the commercial requirements.
Or is it a mixed use, you get to combine all of that together? Billy, you should have just stood up there the entire time.
Well, The whole purpose of the PUD is to mix the uses and blend the parking. And y'all are taking it and going, well, we're not going to do that, so we're going to do apartment and then whatever the other use is. And so you just have to meet the minimum standards for the uses.
Okay.
That's
then,
it.
Then he'll have to meet the minimal standards for the uses. That's the addendum, that's the amended motion. Do you second that still?
I second the motion. And let me just say this to you, Councilwoman Susan. I want you to understand, everyone, that this is just development. This is moving forward. As he made a statement, there are people that did not even show up that doesn't want to be known how they feel about the progress. We listen to everyone. We have listened to you. We listen to other people too that you probably don't know has called us. So it's a mixed feeling in this. And I would like to tell you all that I appreciate you standing up and wanting the best for your community, and I guarantee you we want the best for it too. Sometimes when it comes to elected officials, we have to look forward a little bit more visionary than what you may look at the residents or people in Midwest City. But we have to listen to you also. So I think that development is a good thing, and I want to make sure that in reference to that he does what he's supposed to do, the safety and everything abide by, that it goes forward in the right manner. So thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, I am going to remind you that we do have an amended motion on the floor, and we have a second. Is there any further discussion?
Could I have a clarification of the motion, please?
Basically, the motion, if it passes, you're going to have to meet the minimal requirements. I'm sorry, folks. I have a bad habit of not hitting that button. The amendment is to pass it with the amendment on it that you're going to have to conform to all the standards, parking, minimal standards for parking. You have mixed use, minimal standards for fire, 22 feet, 26 feet, whatever. You're going to have to stick with those minimal standards that we have. No, ma'am.
So you can still have zero setback on the Jacobs?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I have a motion and I have a second. City Clerk, I would like to have a roll call vote, starting with Ward 6.
Moore?
You know, I do want to say something. Jeff, if this passes, Jeff will do a great job. It'll be quality. You know, anything he gets involved in, it's nice. I think his heart's in it. The problem, my only fear is, and I mentioned it, I feel like he's trying to put way too much and too small a footprint. And I did a lot of research over this last weekend, and I found that there's 29 homeowners that live within 300 feet. 29 homeowners, and the average time that they have lived there, if you average it, it's 22 years. You know, so it's, I mean, and that's, the average is, what, 7 to 10 years for across the nation. And so I know we have a group of people that's really vested in this neighborhood and have spent a lot of time here. But, and I'm a developer. I would love to see this go, but I also live across the street from some barking dogs that wakes me up every night for the last 5 years. And I value a night's sleep, and I value, you know, that I think that you should legally and without having someone arrested be able to sleep a night without being interrupted. I think you're dealing with a lot of parking, car horns, fights. Jeff, you can't control everything that's going to go out there, but I mean, I know that it's a great vision. I have a hard time with just the location. If it was, you know, a bigger lot, I'd be excited if you did something 4 times this size. But I've got to vote no, just because I personally wouldn't want to live directly across the street from it.
I would like for it to be voted on with a motion with the minimum of 51 parking spots, because I don't think I understand what you're exactly saying.
I'm not going to change that. We're going to go with the minimum of what?
Don't need to go on.
We have a motion
Continue with the roll call, please.
Allen.
Sell the property.
Yes.
Reed.
Yes.
Bowen. Byrne. Eads.
No.
Dukes.
Abstain. Hmm? Mr. Johnson, the motion failed. I'm sorry. Ladies and gentlemen, before I let you go, I want to make something very clear. You may have won the war, or may have won the battle, but we haven't won the war. The original square mile needs a lot of work, and it's going to continue to decline unless we take this forward. This means increased code enforcement. This means increased pressure on the rentals, and also a vision on what future developments are going to look like in that original mile. And the houses that are being built are well within the vision that was originally set out in the not the comprehensive plan, but the redevelopment project that we passed in 2010. So don't get too happy. We got a lot of work to do down there. And I appreciate, I told you that we would listen to you, that we would take everything into consideration, and we have. As you can see, there's not a person on this horseshoe that hasn't struggled with this. But I'm going to have to echo what Mr. Burns said. Taking shots at our staff, impugning the integrity of people that have worked for this city for 40 years is unacceptable. Making allegations that we're on the take, that we have something to gain from this is unacceptable. There's nobody up here that has anything other than the best interests of this community at heart. So this wasn't a victory. This really wasn't. But your council have listened to you, and we've still got a lot of work to do. So that being said, we'll move into the new business public discussion of our agenda.
I would like to say this, Mayor, that property still belongs to Mr. Johnson. So he has a right to develop, and we may be at the same thing again at another time.
Well, he does have the right to develop.
Can I say one more thing, Matt? You know, and
we really need to wrap this up. I've got a gentleman that wants to come up here and talk.
I just hope and that each of you really challenge yourself and challenge your neighbors to clean up the neighborhood. We've turned down a great opportunity, and hopefully you guys will get out and really put some pressure on to make this turn out the way you'd like it to. But it's not going to happen without a lot of effort from you.
Okay, we're going to move into the new business public discussion of our agenda. Does anyone have anything to bring before the council? I want to remind you that this is not an agenda item, that we can't engage with you in a back and forth discussion. So, sir, please state your name and address for the record.
Mr. Mayor, Larry Roberts, 210 East Jacobs Drive. To address your statement, there was saying that Midwest City's original mile has a long way to go. I think everyone that's fought diligently to keep the integrity of the original mile as a family, you know, the gentleman had said his original intent was to encourage the unity in the mile. And I think he definitely did that, but your promise also to us was to allow us to improve our properties. Yes, by opening those variances up to allow us to improve. We thank you for that. We look forward to it in the future. Thank you very much. On behalf of Midwest City's people, not the target, but the people that have been here and supporting you for many years in taxes, thank you.
Yes, sir. Does anyone else have anything to bring before the Midwest City Council? Hearing none, we are hereby adjourned. I am calling to order the Midwest City Memorial Hospital Authority. We have 2 discussion items. Mr. Sullivan.
Discussion item 1, discussion and consideration of approving the minutes of the regular January 28, 2020 meeting as submitted.
Chair to entertain a motion.
Motion.
I have a motion, I have a second. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstention, motion carries.
Discussion item 2, discussion and consideration of action to relocate assets, change fund managers, or make changes in the statement of investment policy, guidelines, and objectives. We have no recommendations for the board at this.
No action needed on that. Discussion item 2. We now move into new business public discussion of our agenda. Does anyone have anything to bring before the authority? Hearing none, we're hereby adjourned.
Something else come on.
Huh?
It's not
Who's
going
it?
to stop.
Yeah, miss her. Yeah, it was a
It's
tough.
gonna hit me one day.
That was a tough, and I just,
He's 80-something years old or 70-something years old.
she's almost turned, she's even turned 80.
I guess we're going to have to
That's
do
one of
it
those things, just-
again, 'cause it's gonna